everyone. This is going to be fun.
It's great to be here. It's great to see everyone. It really is.
All right, it's now 7:30.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the City of Camarillo Planning Commission regular meeting of May 5th, 2020. It's truly great to see everyone, even in this format, and looking forward to the hearing tonight. Mr. Secretary, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Commissioner Edsel?
Here.
Commissioner Espinosa?
Here.
Commissioner Vandermeer?
Here.
Vice Chair Talmadge?
Here.
Chairman Murphy?
Here.
All present.
Got a full house here. That's great. I'd like to go ahead and lead us in the flag salute for tonight. So if you know where a flag is in your house or want to face the city, put your hand over your heart, please, and let's begin. I pledge allegiance to, there we go, to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have item 4 for this evening, which is to review the agenda from our regular meeting of February the 18th. Do we have minutes? I forget now. Do we have minutes, Joe?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes as submitted in the packet for our meeting of February 18, 2020.
All right. A motion by
I will second.
Edsel, second by Mr. Talmadge. I guess we can go around. I'm in favor of approving the minutes. Mr. Edsel is?
Yes, in favor.
Mr. Espinosa?
Yes.
Ms. Vandermeulen?
You're muted, Beverly.
Yes.
Thank you. And Mr. Talmadge?
Yes.
All right. Motion carries 5-0. The minutes are approved. Am I getting, do I have feedback from my end here? Sure.
A little bit, yeah.
A little closer. Okay, that brings us to item 6 for this evening. Let's see, we have item 5, which is public comments, but we have not received any public comments up to this point, so we will go ahead and move on to item 6. Item 6 is IPD 404, Silver Strand Grid, and may we please have a staff report on that.
Thank you, Chairman Murphy, members of the Planning Commission. IPD 404 is a request from Silver Strand Grid to establish an energy storage facility. The approximately 0.4 acre project site is located at the northeast corner of Hook Street and Willis Avenue in the Camarillo Airport Industrial Area at 375 Willis Avenue. Silver Strand Grid is requesting approval of an industrial plan development permit, IPD 404, for an unmanned energy storage facility on a vacant lot at the northeast corner of Hook Street and Willis Avenue in the Camarillo Airport within the light manufacturing M1 zone. Under Camarillo Municipal Code Section 19.30.040, the Planning Commission is a decision maker for the requested IPD. The project site is generally flat and is currently vacant with some mature trees on the property. There are existing above-ground electrical lines along Hook Street and Willis Avenue. The property to the west is vacant space that is occasionally used for parking. To the east is a single-story office building which is currently in use by Showscapes Urban Landscape Management. To the north is a single-story office building currently in use by Excel Orbital Systems, Inc. And to the southeast is the Ventura County Probation Agency Staff Training Center. The unmanned energy storage facility will include 15 Tesla battery containers on concrete pads that supply electricity to and are charged by an existing Southern California Edison line located at the southwest corner of the property. The facility will be surrounded by a 10-foot tall smooth stucco wall with pilasters, a decorative cap, and a solid opaque entry gate. The proposed wall would provide a setback of 20 feet from the back of curb along both Hook Street and Willis Avenue, and will provide a separation of approximately 13 feet from the building to the north and approximately 17 feet from the building to the east. A parking area is provided inside the gate for service vehicles. New landscaping is proposed on the west and south sides of the facility in the 20-foot setback. The 3 existing mature trees along Willis Avenue are to remain as part of the landscaping. The applicant has provided a noise study that shows the proposed facility will not produce objectionable noise in excess of the noise requirements in Camarillo Municipal Code Chapter 10.34 for industrial properties. Additionally, the project has been reviewed and found to be in compliance with the industrial performance standards outlined in Camarillo Municipal Code Section 19.54. The project was reviewed in accordance with the California Environmental Quality Act and was determined to be categorically exempt from the provisions of CEQA under Class 32 infill development projects. Staff has reviewed and found that the proposed project is consistent with the applicable goals and policies of the city's general plan and the development standards set forth in the zoning ordinance. Staff recommends approval of IPD 404, subject to the conditions of approval. The action of the Planning Commission is final unless an appeal is filed within 10 days of the date of their action. This concludes staff's report.
All right, thank you for that staff report. Appreciate that. Do we have the applicant representative to come to?
I'd like to ask, if, before the applicant speaks, if there's any Planning Commission questions?
I had a couple questions.
Okay, would you want to give them now, or do you want to wait until the applicant speaks?
I can wait till the applicant speaks.
All right, anyone, any other questions by the commissioners?
I have just a couple of questions, but I'll also wait until after the applicant speaks.
Okay.
Okay, Beverly, I see your hand up. If you unmute yourself, go right ahead, please.
There. Got a little touch, but I have a couple, but they can wait.
But they can wait. Mr. Tillman? No. Okay. I guess that, and my questions can wait as well, so if we can go ahead and go into the public testimony, which for this particular item is, as I understand it, only the applicant representative himself. So if we could hear from that individual, that would be great.
That's correct. So can we please have the applicant access to Zoom provided?
I believe.
Okay, hello. Can everybody hear me and see me?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
I can
Good evening.
see.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dustin Polciani. I'm the representative on behalf of Silver Strand Grid, the applicant. I'm participating tonight virtually from Denver, Colorado. Unfortunately, can't be with all of you this evening, but we do welcome the opportunity to speak before you this evening here virtually. In addition to myself, we have a couple other of my colleagues with Silverstrand here this evening that can answer any of the questions that you may have. And we also have a group of our consultants with us as well. So welcome any questions that you may have and any information that we can provide beyond the staff report.
Excellent, and thanks a lot for making yourself available this evening. At this point, I'd like to let's see. Yes, do we have any questions from the commissioners for the applicant?
Yeah, I have one, Mr. Murphy, Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wonder if the applicant could explain a little bit of, what exactly does the facility do? Yeah, so that would be my question.
Okay. So basically, to try to keep this, as brief as possible, and again, welcome any additional information that we can provide for you. But we are going to build a standalone battery energy storage facility here at this location that will support the local through a contract that we have with Southern California Edison. We will be building a Tesla manufactured battery operating system, and we have some individuals here from Tesla that can answer some of the technical and specification questions that you may have about the facility. But in a nutshell, what we're going to do is accumulate energy that is produced by the substation through the overhead electrical lines that are right nearby this particular piece of property, and we will store that energy for a period of time. And then at the point in time when Edison and the substation need a distribution of that energy back to support the grid, we will immediately distribute that electricity back onto the overhead lines and back to the substation to assist with local capacity and to provide resiliency in the event of unexpected demands in the system, and then also to provide support for the production of renewable energy sources in the solar and wind capacities, and also to ensure that the grid will operate at an optimal frequency.
Thank you. That was helpful.
All right, do we have any other questions from the commissioners for the applicant? Luis, go ahead, please.
Yeah, for the applicant, I wanted to ask, these are lithium-ion batteries, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And as far as the area that this peak station is serving, is it areas inside and outside the city limits, but is there like a limitation as to where it would actually serve?
If I could, I do have Sarah Mills, who's our Director of Projects, and she is working directly. And I'd like to add just real quickly, we did not have the opportunity to get anybody with Edison here this evening to participate, but Sarah works extensively with SCE. And if Sarah, if you could jump in here for a minute and unmute, if you might be able to answer some of those questions for the Commissioner.
Absolutely. Good evening, and thank you again for having us. To the question of are the limitations of where the power flows, the answer technically is no, but generally the power coming from our facility would serve the general area around it. So the airport authority and the businesses in that area, depending on what the power grid looks like at any point in time when we're dispatching into the power grid. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Who else? Gene, did you have a question? Please
yes,
go ahead.
A question for the applicant. What is the capacity of the storage that's going to be provided, and what does that represent as a percentage of the power grid in that area?
Well, Commissioner, I can say, generally speaking, and I might defer back here to Sarah and also to Jason Canidalons, who's our Director of Energy Storage Solutions and has been integral in designing the system here in conjunction with Planning Commission, with staff, and also with Edison. But I can say, generally speaking, this is going to be an 11 megawatt power facility generating 44 megawatt hours of energy. So basically what that means is that our system can operate at a full power on a full charge for a period of 4 hours, and we will be able to power 8,800 average homes' use of electricity on for that period of 4 hours. So that's kind of generally speaking in terms of the capacity. I'm not sure if Sarah or Jason, if you have some additional information that you could provide to answer the commissioner's question.
The question of, how much of the local power does this serve? We don't actually know the answer to that. That would be a question that we could ask of Southern California Edison and come back to you with the answer.
That's okay. I understand. How long does a battery last if it's operating at full capacity? 4 hours?
Yes, and this particular system would.
If you're running at less than full capacity, how long does it last? Still 4 hours?
For that answer, Commissioner, I might want to bring in Jason, Mr. Kneedlehans, if he could unmute. He might be able to provide a little bit more detail to that for you.
Yep. Hello, everyone. Thank you again for allowing us to be here today. So it's directly proportional to the amount of power that you would output of the system. So if we have an 11 megawatt system that has a 4 hour duration, if we discharge at 5.5 megawatts, that makes that an 8 hour system.
Okay.
Okay. So it's directly proportional to the.
Yeah. So it's linear, not asymptotic or anything.
That is correct, unless you get to the very extremes, and then you might see some of that, but it would be only for a short duration. But yes, in general, correct, it's linear.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gene. Beverly, I think I see you trying to unmute yourself there, so we'll hang on and see if you have some questions or comments. There we go.
On the same line of the prior question, if you delete all the power in it, you run it for 4 hours, how long does it take the whole system to recharge? So,
okay. Yep. Yeah, I can answer that. So that comes back to some of the electrical efficiencies of the system. So that's about 4 1/4 hours, I believe. Let me do a very quick calculation here. It's about 4 3/4 hours is what it would take to recharge the system fully.
Fast.
that are in the area?
Oh, I apologize. I didn't hear the first part of the question there.
So the power that you get, that you save, is that coming from the power lines in the area, or is that solar?
It comes from the power lines in the area that may have solar energy or wind energy already being transmitted over those power lines. So indirectly, it takes energy from those facilities, but directly it takes it from the overhead lines in the area.
Thank you.
Yep.
My other questions were answered.
All right, thank you, Beverly. Okay, I have a couple questions, and they're related to the noise. I read through the noise study, and it looks like there are at least times when the noise level gets fairly high to the city maximum threshold for this area. This is not a continuous noise, is it? Does it only make noise when it's recharging or when the facility is in use? How does that work?
Well, Commissioner, I can give you a really general answer, but again, part of the beauty of having a great team that we have here, I think I'd like to bring Jason back in. I think, Jason, can you answer that with a lot more specificity than I could hope to do in this case?
Yeah, sure, no problem. So correct, that noise level is really only during the charge and discharge times. And really, it only is at its maximum when the system is charging or discharging at the maximum power. Other than that, it would be much less noise. And I guess I'll just leave it at that for now. If you have any other questions, I think we could probably have somebody from Tesla answer that. But in general, correct, it is related to the amount of power.
All right, so it sounds like most of the time there's not a whole lot of noise coming off of this facility.
That is correct. Nothing, what we usually equate it to is something like a commercial building with its HVAC units running. It's very similar to that. Correct. But yeah, during those times when it's charging and discharging, correct.
All right, thank you. That's very helpful. Do we have any other questions? Beverly, are you unmuting yourself? Any others?
One way to do it. On that, since you're building a block wall around the facility, will that help mute that sound, or will it make it louder if it vibrates against the wall?
Excuse me. We designed the height of the wall in conjunction with our facilities and our design, with consultant feedback, and then also pursuant to the noise study and working with the staff, we came up with an adjustment of the height of the wall that would basically try to address that to keep all of the noise contained within our footprint and our premises. And we also worked in conjunction with our landlord, which is the Ventura County Airport, to ensure that any concerns that they would have as a landowner and for their surrounding tenants, that noise would be mitigated as it properly should be. And Jason, I don't know if you have anything else to add there on that.
I do not, but in most cases, the type of structures that we have there, the CMU wall with the stucco, in most cases that will attenuate or reduce sound, unless there's some harmonics or something like that. But in this case, we would expect it to reduce the noise level, such as what Dustin mentioned.
Thank you.
Okay, Dustin, you mentioned the County of Ventura. The County of Ventura is the underlying landholder, and so does SCE have the lease with the county, or do you folks have the lease with the county?
Yes, Commissioner, we do. We in 2018 we entered into an option to lease agreement with the county, and since that time period, we've been working under an option agreement to do our particular studies. And then also I've been working directly with the airport director and his staff, and Madeline Hurley is actually on here this evening as well. Ms. Hurley and I worked together on the actual lease agreement. We worked through all the terms and finalized those, and then I'm happy to report that just here a couple of weeks ago on April 21st, the County Board of Supervisors approved our lease agreement. And prior to that, the Airport Authority had two separate meetings back in December of last year that we went before the authority for their approval as well. But yeah, with that approval now, we are set, even though we're still on our option to lease agreement, to execute that lease agreement with the county and the airport here at the appropriate time.
Okay, that's excellent. And within that lease agreement, is it well spelled out that you folks will be responsible for all of your facilities, including the 10-foot wall? If there's graffiti, for instance, on the wall, does the lease state that you folks will be the party responsible for cleaning that up?
Absolutely, yeah. We want to adhere to the terms of our lease, obviously with the county and the airport in mind, and then of course any city code requirements that would be in place. But yes, we would not want anything to damage the aesthetics of what we're trying to set up there for the community and for the airport and the customers. And so, yeah, graffiti, landscaping maintenance, all the typical things that a tenant would be required to do, we will do.
Excellent. Thank you, Dustin. Let's see, do we have any other further questions? Luis, you're raising your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, just one last one. For any prior installations, was there ever any incidents of fire issues due to runaway energy charging or so forth?
Commissioner, I'd like to actually bring Mr. Kneedlehan back in. Jason, if you could address the Commissioner's question, please.
Yeah, definitely. So AbleGrid is relatively new to the development of energy storage systems, even though a number of our team members have come from various integrators or general contractors who install these. And I can say that from my experience, I have not been involved in a project that has had that particular issue. And I would say that that's actually one reason we chose the Tesla energy storage system in this case. I'm a part of the NFPA 855 committee, which is national standards development. And we've had Tesla come in and demonstrate or actually show us some videos of them looking to put their systems into thermal runaway. And they actually respond very well to that, kind of almost self-extinguishing, which is a little bit different than other systems. Also, people are not required to enter the system, such as first responders or firefighters. So that's important, as that keeps those people safe as well. I guess that's what I would say on the thermal runaway piece for now. If you have any additional questions, definitely willing to answer those for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Gene? David? No?
I just may have a question for staff, not the applicant.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, just, and I know that some of the comments or questions that were submitted earlier was, for staff, would seem like the city normally wouldn't have jurisdiction over this project. My understanding is we have it because it was set forth in the lease that it was to come through our jurisdiction. Is that a correct assessment or not?
Correct, Commissioner. Yes, the property is owned by the county, by the airport to be specific, but the city has jurisdiction over it because it's a private entity, and this is for a public utility.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, do we have any further questions from the commissioners for staff or the applicant? I don't see any. Oh, go ahead, Luis.
One quick one for staff. The setback requirements, I noticed in the report was talking about the, I think the south and the west having the 20-foot setback from the facility to the back of the curb, but buildings on the north and the east, they had 13-foot and 17-foot setbacks, respectively. Is there a minimum setback for a facility of this type?
There's not for the interior, and that is a setback from the wall to the buildings.
Okay, and what are the occupancies to the north and the east? Any information about who occupies those buildings that are adjoining the facility?
Yes. So in the So the surrounding uses are Showscapes Urban Landscape Management. That is to the east. To the north is Excel Orbital Systems, Inc. And then down south to the southeast is the Ventura County Probation Agency Staff Training Center. I don't know if that answers your question, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to know who the occupancies were, what the exposure was.
All right, thank you. Do we have any further questions for staff or the applicant?
Thank you, Sam. So it sounds like the applicant, unless there's any other commissioner questions for the applicant, we can have the applicant turn their camera off, so we'll go last call. Okay, thank you applicants for your participation and for all the terrific responses, answering the questions. Those were good questions. So I'll turn it back over to you, Chairperson Murphy.
Okay, thank you. Great. We'll go ahead and close the public testimony portion of this review and open it up to commissioner comments on this particular application. Mr. Edsel?
Yeah, I think it's a great location for this thing rather than somewhere nearer the city. And it seems like they, you have the noise study and they're in compliance, and it's, for what it is, it's a nice looking facility out there that's going to be landscaped. So I support its approval.
All right, thank you. Mr. Espinosa?
Yeah, I think that I'd like to see a project like this that is really sort of environmentally friendly, that provides that type of function and that type of backup for the electrical system. And, I definitely can support this project.
All right, thank you. Ms. Vandermeulen?
I was a little on the cautious side at first, but after listening to the presentation and the factors on the noise and looking where it is, it looks like a good place for it, and it'll be a good addition to our electrical power, seems like. So I think it's a pretty good choice.
All right, thank you. Mr. Talmadge?
Yes, a couple of comments. First off, I definitely support this kind of a project, and the location is excellent. Minimal impact on the neighbors, if you may. But just my own prognostication, I think we're going to see more of these kinds of facilities as we look at greater and greater reliance on renewable energy sources, be it wind, be it sun, or whatever. The sun isn't out all day, and you've got to do something with that energy, and it has to be stored somewhere. So this kind of a project, I think, makes a lot of sense to have storage facilities in areas where you can re-energize and keep the system going so we don't have brownouts or whatever that may occur. So I think it's a good project, it's the right time, and it's a good place, and I support it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I don't have much to add to that. I do think it's a good location for it. It's a good new type of use, and I was a little bit concerned about the noise until I started thinking about how often that noise would be, and it doesn't sound like it's going to be even in existence for at least the higher decibels for hardly any part of its operation. So I can certainly support the project. And since there are no further comments, I think that we can call for a resolution.
Thank you, Chairman Murphy. Resolution number PC 2020-08, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Camarillo approving a request by Silver Strand Grid for an industrial plan development permit to construct an energy storage facility located at 375 Willis Avenue in the Camarillo Airport Industrial Area in the light manufacturing M1 zone, further described and set forth as IPD 404.
I'll like to make a motion to waive any further reading and move to adopt the resolution.
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Espinosa, second by Mr. Edsel to go ahead and vote on this resolution. So I think we'll do this person by person, starting with Mr. Edsel. Yes.
I vote in favor of it, yes.
In favor. Mr. Talmadge.
In favor, yes.
Thank you. Ms. Vandermeulen?
Favor? Yes.
Okay. Mr. Espinosa?
Yes.
Great, and I too am in favor, so the motion carries 5-0. Thank you. All right, so that that brings us to item 7 of this public hearing, selection of final concept plans for Camarillo Old Town properties, and ask for a staff report on this, please.
So we're going to be connecting with our consultant architect, David Goodale, who will be providing the presentation this evening.
Good evening, Chairman Murphy, Commissioners. I am David Goodale with Goodale Architecture Planning. We were commissioned to study with the community and the city 2 sites in Old Town, both of which have buildings that have basically come to the end of their time and are now presenting real opportunities to enliven Old Town and provide more recreation for the city. Jackie, I'm a little bit wondering if that's the first slide. Aha. Okay. So we're going to run through a little bit of a timeline because process and public process in this case was really important to the outcome of these projects. We started with the courthouse in January of 2019. We had a program workshop, and then the fire station and DISDAR became kind of fused into the project, so we were basically working with 2 sites at once. We did a second program workshop for DISDAR in May of 2019, and then fused the 2 together from then on with a combined program review with council in June of 2019, a design workshop in September of 2019 for both sites, and then a review of concepts by council from November through February. There were a couple rounds of refinement. So a fairly extensive and intensive community interactive process. Next slide, please. And so if you look at this diagram, basically we tallied up votes for the kinds of program that would be appropriate for both sites. On the left, the courthouse, on the right, DISDAR. The courthouse, there was a fairly strong contingent for a performing arts facility on that site, and we'll come back to that discussion. There was also an equally strong energy for a casual, somewhat active, but a casual park, and perhaps a small amphitheater or a pagoda. Next in line were the small garden venue, enhancing farmers market, and expanding the parking was a fairly common theme. There was some discussion of a splash pad on both sites, and we'll come back to that discussion, but it did not continue on through the design process. At DISDAR, there was a very strong support for a performance venue. Again, the splash pad was discussed. There was real strong public support for expanded parking on that site, for an exercise area, and for restrooms at DISDAR. A little bit less, but still strong, were support for an expanded top lot, a botanical sort of species garden, and there was one for a parking structure. And so that was a summary of the program input for those 2 sites. Next image, please. So the next step is we took that programming input to council to basically get direction to proceed further. And on the courthouse property, there was basically support to maintain the farmers market and public parking, to support passive recreational uses by Old Town. And examples of those would be lunching, taking an evening stroll after dinner, having a sitting garden, kind of adult activities, if you will. And then in the initial part of the courthouse property, the school property was also part of that study. The council determined that without ownership of that property, it might not be prudent to invest recreational dollars on that site until there's a real kind of concept about what's going to happen in the long-term future. On Dizdar, there was a kind of formal decision to demolish the fire station as part of the concept, and pretty strong support for demolishing the chamber building, which needed to basically retain itself as a public use. And so that was a difficult one, but it seemed inevitable that it would not support the best concept for a park in the future. Also at council was an emphasis on recognizing the history of the park and the city, all of the events that have happened there over time, including the fire station and its predecessors and its successors in that building, and that could be done through paving, through public art, and other means. There was a direction to develop the top lot as a firefighting themed lot to kind of maintain some presence of the fire station, and to expand the park primarily for passive uses, and then to provide a performance area and band shell, as well as expanded parking and loading. From there, for both sites, we developed 3 concepts, and I will jump from 1 to 3 and then sort of settle on 2, left to right. Number 1 basically developed a park that was a linear incursion into the site on the west half of the property, or west side of the property, basically developing a loop, a walking loop off of the sidewalk, pretty much at level with the sidewalk. And then the market and the parking would be up and down on plan. The third scheme on the far right was developed as a sidewalk park, and we would, in that concept, have dropped the front part of the park down to sidewalk level and then stepped up to the parking and the farmers market sort of south of the park. This one was a little more popular than the first one, but there were concerns about trash and other things kind of collecting with it so close, with the park being so close to the sidewalk. And there were also opportunities in number 2 that weren't there in number 3. And in number 2, basically what's happening here is an elevated park. It's up about 5 feet off of the parking level. The parking level is still elevated about 1.5 feet off of the sidewalk. And the park is basically something that is a bit of a retreat that has a water feature and has a look out over both farmers market and, on good days, a good part of the city and the rooftops of the retail across the street. The interesting thing about this one, just as an early rough plan, is also its potential to connect to the big field in the future in terms of recreational synthesis of those 2 sites. So this one was pretty universally liked by all of the tables that we had at the community design meeting. So we went, and then on DISTAR, which is the next slide, again, we'll jump from 1 to 3 and settle in 2. The first concept, and what's basically different about these 3 concepts, is the placement of the amphitheater. In option 1, the amphitheater is up in the northeast corner, playing to the park from there. The third one is along the eastern wall, playing sort of broadside into the park. And the number 2, the band shell is basically in the southeast corner, on a diagonal with the entry to the park, and on a diagonal with Old Town. But number 1 and number 3 both tried to preserve the majestic ficus rubber tree that is in the southwest corner. And I think the consensus, this is sort of an independent issue actually to the design of all 3 of these. But the consensus was that the need for parking and loading was so intense in this neighborhood that it was felt that there was a lot of loss of efficiency by coming into the parking lot with a sort of curvilinear approach. So number 1 is the one concept that preserved the chamber building, should there have been a good program for it. And then a meadow sort of to the northeast corner, a small garden to the south, and the top lot kind of off of the meadow on the lower left. Number 3 basically aligned the new functions along the eastern wall with the amphitheater in the center, with the garden at the top and the top lot at the bottom, and then the meadow of the park at the central portion. I should say that in all 3 of these concepts, there was a real consensus about the park should be kept open for festival times and other big events, and not have program or big obstructions at the center of added to the center of the park. So the scheme that seemed to be the most well-liked is the middle scheme, primarily for its axial relationship to Old Town, the ability to service the band shell, the acoustics of the band shell playing away from the neighborhoods and to Old Town, and in general, its formal connections to Old Town and the ceremonial entry. We'll get into some of the more detailed features as we look at refinements, but so these were the basic zoning or placement diagrams that were responded to by the community. So the next image is basically the council's response to the community's review of these schemes. The council was in concurrence with number 2 for the courthouse. They were in concurrence, it's actually a code requirement, that there be a restroom for farmers market, but that it also be able to serve the park. And then there are some detailed comments that will follow. On DISTAR, they were also in concurrence with concept 2 and agreed to the requirement for a restroom at DISTAR as it expands its scale and hopefully its usefulness to the community. And again, there are some comments that will follow in more detail. So that brings us to the present and to the 2 concepts. Well, it brings us to a few months ago. So these 2 concepts were refined progressively in 2 more meetings with City Council, which were really good sessions and that helped develop some really useful detail as we developed. So first, the courthouse. a principal direction from the initial scheme was to mediate pedestrians and bikes. If you look at number 8 on the upper diagram, we have bicycles coming down a short ramp into the parking. I think one of the goals of this project was to allow bicycles to be able to have a route separate from Ventura east-west that could kind of cross this site and not have to go down a set of stairs. So that was one direction that we find a way to help mediate that. We'll talk about that in a moment. Flush paving, no obstructions, so that farmers market can operate. So all of the trees, all of the what would normally be curbs or stops are not happening here. This is a very flat, open parking lot. There was direction to study increased parking capacity, notably to let the parking flow through from east to west and allow a better flow during the weekdays when farmers market is not in operation. And basically, we were able to do that when we got from 55 spaces to something in the range of 67 parking spaces in the design concept. There was encouragement to employ public art and integrate it with Channel Studio Islands, to develop infrastructure for electrical vehicle charging, and to potentially, in the future, select design elements from this site and carry them into the Channel Islands studio parking to really integrate the whole frontage along Ventura Avenue and improve the presentation to the street. Then there was some further refinement after that one. I'm sorry, Jackie, could we go back to that one? That was to consolidate the trash areas that are shown on the left in the upper diagram. But we basically let a big area on the right of the lower diagram left in white there that we didn't need to leave in white. It's basically right now a deserted loading area or alleyway for the courthouse. And if, in fact, we put our restrooms and our trash and storage in that pocket, it really opens up the westerly corner for landscape. And I think that was a good outcome. So then we went on to the final study on the courthouse, which is the next image. And so this is what we are presenting to you tonight and for your review and hopefully approval. What is happening from left to right at the top? Off of Ventura Boulevard, there is a ramp, number 3, that brings disabled people directly up to the site. They can go to Farmers Market from there or proceed on up another ramp to the 5-foot-high park. And so that basically addresses the ADA issue. There is another ramp at the middle of the site where number 5 is that maybe gets people traveling from east to west onto a ramp and up into Farmers Market off of the sidewalk at the middle. That central stair would basically stay in the same place. It's still a trellis, but a new trellis that would have a wider sidewalk. Basically, we're pushing the entire market a little bit south so that we can have a more generous sidewalk along Ventura. So new trellis, stair, and a direct walkway through the market or through the parking with special paving that would arrive at a terraced water feature. On either side of that water feature would be a stair that one could take up to, again, to the park. And the park is developed as both a loop and or a place to really sit and meditate and converse and really take one's time. On the west side, where the ramp and stairs come up, just for a little bit more interest, there's a landing level that provides another sort of intimate nook for seating that's halfway up, about 2.5 feet up on the way to the park. And we can see here the restrooms sort of tucked behind a tree, supervisable but a little bit discreet, and the trash area and storage area on the lower right, that's sort of 12, 13, and 14. And the way that we approach to the bicycle issue is basically with a line of bollards that will pretty forcefully make bicycles come to a near stop and take a slow curve around that corner, and also bring awareness to pedestrians who are approaching that crossing. I suspect that we will also eventually need signage in that location. Just south of that is bicycle parking for both the farmers market and the park. The electrical charging stations are up at number 17, sort of near the street, and for parking for Old Town. And the sort of tan color is basically conceptually, wherever that's happening, there would be not curbs, but just a highlight of a colored stripe in the asphalt of the parking lot, so that it would be a rather unique sort of accenting between the concrete finishes and the asphalt finishes of the lot. There's also DG in that decomposed granite in that central strip and in some of the planting areas that are in the corner, so that it can reduce the amount of asphalt where there's no cars there, but also allow a solid, smooth surface for farmers market to operate on. So that's that is the courthouse. Maybe I should pause unless you think otherwise to entertain any questions about this plan so far. Okay. The next image is a study of how the farmers market could work within the realm of the parking. And what we have done is we understood basically a 13-foot minimum walking aisle in farmers market. We have allowed 16 to 17 feet in all three directions, and tried to treat it like a loop, much the same way that the parking will work, and letting the trees kind of coexist with where the cars will be parking parallel to that strip. And then cars or trucks also will be able to park at the very outside perimeter. And what you're seeing in the purple are basically 10-foot by 10-foot tent canopy modules that could be done in any number of ways, but right here are shown as kind of 4s and 2s, kind of double loaded and single loaded. And we have reviewed this with farmers market and generally have worked with them to refine it. And I think we're at a point of satisfaction with the market. These are simply some prototypes. I think for both sites, it's important to say that there is not yet any design work done in terms of the elements that will go into it three-dimensionally, but these were some of the elements that we showed both during the programming phase and the concept phase to demonstrate different ways that elements might happen: terraced water, existing trellises, a walking garden one could loop around, and the nature of this sort of terraced top portion of the site. and shade for the market and for parking during the week. And this a sketch from basically the easterly portion of the sidewalk where one would come up the east stair and into the parking area, looking diagonally to the stepped water feature and looking up to the terraced park above. And then at the center, moving from left to right, are trees that would, over time, provide shade and maturity to the landscape. On this star, the plan refinement went as follows. City Council comment on the concept 2 was basically the support of restrooms, but not support for a splash pad. And I think that came both from cost issues, maintenance issues, safety issues, and appropriateness issues relative to the centrality of this to Old Town. There was direction to reemploy, at least in concept, the donor bricks and the pillars of community concept that currently exists at the front of the chamber. There was direction to combine this idea of a neighborhood park with a civic role, that this park should be about history, it should be a gateway, it should be an icon. Importantly, you see it as you come off of the freeway, you see it as you are leaving Old Town, moving to the east. So it's a really sort of milestone point in the city. And there was encouragement to allow not only for historic recognition, but also emerging culture and public art, and to allow portions of the park to be given over to new art. And finally, to specifically honor the history of the fire station building in the development of the park. At a further meeting with City Council, we had originally placed the restrooms basically right adjacent to the amphitheater, and we were encouraged not to do that. And we also had a fairly closed shell for the amphitheater massing. And I want to emphasize again that we, as a sort of planning design team with the city, are not designing the amphitheater yet. It's a placeholder. And we will need to go through a process, or the architect will need to go through a process with the community, look at prototypes, study options, and develop something that emerges from that process. So what is there now is indeed a placeholder. Next image, please. So what happens in detail here is we are first of all proposing to move the Adolfo Don Camarillo statue, the equestrian statue, to the front, and basically pair it or combine it with flanking trellises, a garden, and a brick seating area, all of which would be devoted to the retaining the bricks that are the memorial bricks, and also using the pillars of the trellises as the pillars of community, carry on that theme. We've added conceptually some sycamores to that frontal area, so it becomes a real cohesive environment of sycamores, trellis, and entry. And then as we go all the way on the diagonal to the amphitheater, we flank the amphitheater with two trellises, which would basically help screen ramped entry to the amphitheater as well as service from either side. The restrooms in this concept have been moved south between the top lot and the amphitheater, and the lawn of the amphitheater will support event booths in a radial fashion around that lawn. Big lawn number 4 still remains open for big public events, and the garden in this case sort of flows through from the sidewalk and arrives at the amphitheater lawn with the capacity to have a lot of niches, to have potential meetings or group gatherings there that would be very intimate, surrounded by walls of landscape, and also to provide additional booths, which is number 18, to support events. We've also added picnic benches and sitting benches throughout the park and expanded the top lot area and added a kind of overlook for that top lot area of benches that are backed away from the street and create a bit of a buffer from kids running from the top lot out into the street. I should emphasize here, because this will come up at the conclusion, the only trees that we have removed in this concept are the 2 that are in the parking lot, and that basically would have made the parking lot impossible. The number 12 is the location of the charging stations in this concept. And I guess we should say that the number of parking spaces, I can't read here, 20 parking spaces, not including the 24 parking spaces on the street. And there will be a loading area right next to the amphitheater. Number 15, which is at the very upper right, is basically, at the encouragement of the community, a major sign landmark, again, that would be very evident from the freeway and announce the presence of both the park and Old Town. Number 16, to kind of round out this image, is a new tree. There are a few smaller new trees that we've dotted in, but 16 would be a new tree for the tree lighting ceremony. There's some concern that the existing tree is getting kind of out of reach for, and so that will be supplied with electricity and the ability to light up that tree. So that's a summary of DISDAR. And next were some relevant prototypes. Again, the history of the fire station. One of the concepts for the fire station is that that garden that was at the upper right would be able to support walls and plaques and other art installations that would basically be part of the surrounding walls of landscape that would kind of help enclose that park. They could be partial walls or vertical pylons of some kind. So the festival and the tree lighting, tot lot themed after the fire station, intimate gardens, and band shell and trellises as prototypes for the park. And this image then is taken at the intersection, right at the diagonal entry to the park. We propose in this sketch to add a major signage to the park spanning over the 2 trellises, garden in the middle, brick floor, and the sort of sycamores that are surrounding that entry area. And then the band shell in the background with the flanking trellises. On the right, you can sort of see the fire-themed tot lot, and on the left, the landscape walls of the garden are kind of in the background, and the big ficus tree and existing jacaranda tree also on the left with the church in the background. So then, as we are currently in the process of preparing an estimate, and we have communicated this to council and are now sharing it with you also, that the estimate is not based on the most basic budget materials. It is not based on a super intensified level of detail, super intensified lighting detail in certain areas. It is basically being developed consistent with the materials that were used in the redevelopment of Old Town and the level of lighting and finish and detail that was used in that work. And so we want to share that that's sort of the approach to preparing the way for the future for this project. So our next steps are, we have scheduled a city council review to look at exhibits, estimates, and implementation steps beyond this point in time. I should note at this point that there were 2 public comments that have been submitted to you. One from Ruff Smith from Farmers Market in support of the project. One from Judith Lorentowski, who wanted confirmation that we were not pulling trees out of the park in order to make way for new pathways or program areas. And we confirmed that the only 2 trees that we are proposing to remove are the 2 in the drive of the parking lot. So with staff's recommendation, we are here before you tonight to ask approval of these 2 planning concepts.
Okay, Mr. Goodale, that's an outstanding presentation, very much appreciated. Do we have any comments from Mr. Goodale from commissioners? Any commissioner comments, questions?
I have a couple of questions. I'm not sure if it should go now or after the staff makes a presentation.
That was our staff presentation. The consultant was presenting the overview on behalf of staff.
Fine. Then I will ask my questions.
Okay, thank you.
Right. I noted with interest, Mr. Goodale, that, and thank you for your presentation. That was very thorough and very complete. That you did acknowledge the one letter that came in about maintaining trees, especially that one ficus tree, and it is certainly problematic for access to and from the proposed parking. Is this parking intended for the park only, or for the adjacent neighbors? Because we just approved a project across the street from this, or well, not quite across the street, but very, very close. And I'm curious if the parking is intended for either overflow from those projects or secondary parking for those projects.
My impressions from the community during both projects, actually, in the workshops, was that it's very difficult to separate those issues because there's basically a sense that at certain times, one has a difficult time to find a parking space. And I think that it relates to the park and concern about parking for the park. I think it also relates to concern about parking for Old Town. I didn't hear any concerns about parking for the residential area or having more overflow parking for the residential area.
Okay.
That's correct. And I would confirm that the parking that exists in front of the courthouse now is owned by the city, and it's utilized as overall district parking for the Old Town area. And the public comment that we received through the robust outreach that we completed was to try to expand preserve and expand the amount of parking available for Old Town as much as possible. And so that's what we've achieved with the updated, enhanced design for the proposed concept.
Okay. Are you proposing, Mr. Goodell, are you proposing any electrical outlets or power in the park for some of the, quote, passive uses such as barbecues, but especially the band shell is going to need power for plugging amplifiers and other equipment in? Maybe that's too much in detail for this point in time, but I think we need to be concerned that there is power available for those people that need it.
Yeah, yes, there has been discussion about the band shell for sure, and for the tree lighting, that we have something there, and for the garden area where there would be booths. We have not gotten into kind of wholesale coverage of the park, especially for things like picnic barbecue areas and that sort of thing. I think that's definitely a next step of discussion. I think in the estimate, we've got a pretty good coverage of conduiting throughout the park that will be possible to do in a next phase.
Right. And then sort of a follow-on to that, you said tree lighting. I'm thinking of, is there a provision for lighting in the park at Didsar for evening events? Because sometimes when we have the fair, it does go, later in the day, and there may be an opportunity for some kind of event going on in the park where you would want to have some lighting for people to see how to get around and where to go and whatnot. So are you providing any other external lighting?
We do have an allowance for lighting throughout the park, and it is right now basically, I think, directed at the feature areas, the main entry point, the amphitheater, but also at least enough lighting to circulate through the park on its main ways. I don't think we have thought about ambient lighting for the whole park, but that's where we are currently.
Yeah, no, I was thinking in terms of lighting bollards or something like that.
Yes.
That could follow the paths, things like that. That's all my questions for right now. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, thank you, Jane. Do we have any other comments? Beverly?
I do, thank you. Excuse me. On the courthouse property, one of the things I'm just a little concerned with is when I heard people talk about the views at the different conversations, they were talking about the views from when you're standing up on the grass behind the courthouse. This looks like it's going to be considerably lower than that. So I don't think the views are going to be quite what maybe they were expecting, when we had the open forums on this. But in relationship to that, are we going to have to be building several retaining walls to put all the layers in? And will we need to put a new retaining wall back, along where the grass is, where the building is cut away? Are we going to be able to keep some of the support that's already there?
My apologies, Ms. Vanderbilt, and I'm having a little difficulty hearing, but I think I got it. I'll take a crack at it. I think that if you sort of take the 1.5 foot step from the street, and then another maybe 1.5 foot of slope in the parking lot, plus the 5 feet of the park, you get up maybe 7-8 feet. So it's not like you're going to be staring off over at the mountains, but you'll see the mountain tops. And yes, there will be a requirement, I think, for new retaining walls. I think the cleanest way a contractor will tell us to do this is to get that out, because the footings and everything else that are there are just, they would have to be tested, and their configuration would not be right for new retaining. So I think we would build new retaining walls, but the way that we have planned it is basically to build them in a way that steps up slowly with planters so that it's not a sheer wall that one is facing coming to the park.
Okay. Yeah, I was just concerned when I was looking at it, if we would have to take everything out and start from scratch. And then I figured you would have to layer those up. Then when they're layered up, would there be a way to put a few tables up there besides just benches for people to sit on for meals or board games or, lunch snacks at the farmer's market or during the week if people wanted to gather for some board games or card games or something like that?
Yes, and I think right now we have sort of dotted benches around and throughout the park, but I think that's kind of the next level of programming that I think is very interesting. Like, should we create things where people could sit down and play a game of cards or chess, or rather than simply have benches where you're sitting 2 by 2? I think that's an interesting direction. We have not developed that yet in the detailing of the park.
I was just trying to think of ways to maybe utilize it more often during the week, not just go at farmers markets or special events. So, let me see. I think that's all for that. And then on Vistar Park, has there been any discussion on like a half-court basketball or something for like older kids or young adults to play while, to use some of that grass area?
There was. Very early on during the programming phases, we did provide imagery of kind of small courts, practice courts. And I think the general consensus was that this is best as a kind of unprogrammed recreational passive park as opposed to having sports venues of any kind. That just seemed to be the consensus as it developed.
I was just thinking in the line of families that come or, teenagers in the area that live near there. Just one spot or, like just one basketball hoop with a half court around it or something, but just trying to figure out ways to utilize that middle age group, rather than just the kids or adults. So just a thought I had.
No, actually, what's interesting, and if that parking lot is not full all of the time, one sort of wonders what could happen at the eastern end of it when cars aren't there. Why not be able to use it? It does provide some potential conflict, though, when one is playing and then cars start coming. So that might not be a good idea.
No, it might not work. But I was just trying to figure out how to get that middle age group in there, a little bit more involved with the area. So, but those were, I think, all the questions I had on that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Beverly. Do we have any further questions from the commissioners or Mr. Goodell or staff? Luis, go ahead, please.
Well, first off, I thought all 3 plans for each site I thought were really nicely done. I can see why they went with ultimately the design concept too. I see a lot of good traits and characteristics for that design concept. The one thing on the Disdar Park site, though, that I was concerned about was the lawn area, the larger lawn area, that number 4 on that map. I've been to Fiesta performances there, stage performances, and everyone normally enjoys, the whole area, lawn area, to be able to spread out with seating that they furnish themselves and be able to see the stage and the stage performance. You're showing event booths that are sort of like right in between that area and the stage. So I wondered if that was considered, what impact that might have as far as obstructing the view of people that are there for festival seating, for performances and such.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think that's definitely something one might want to continue to study relative to where those booths could best go. It's a pretty big area. I mean, it's kind of equivalent to what the central area of the park is now. But I think that's a very interesting critique. It all very much depends on the quantity of people that are going to fill the park. But I think it's definitely something to consider.
Okay. And on the courthouse side, I mean, that looks like it's going to be a nice, really pleasing to the eye area that will be a draw to Old Town. I assume that the parking there is indefinitely intended to be free for residents that want to use that lot when the farmers market is not set up. Is that my understanding?
Well, it might be that Joe could speak more knowingly of that, but I have heard repeatedly that not very many people support paid parking in Old Town. So I think that is currently the intention, that there's no meters. Well, it would be difficult to put meters there because of the farmers market, but
That's correct. For now, there's no pay for parking in our Old Town area. I also want to note, since I have an opportunity at this time, that we did not receive any comments other than the 2 written comments that Mr. Goodale provided an overview on. So in terms of public comment, we did not receive any, other than the 2 that we've already discussed.
All right, well, that's all I have.
All right, thanks, Luis. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Goodell? Looks like we've got, well, okay, I have a couple. On the courthouse project, is the understanding that when all of those improvements are done and that beautiful site has been improved in that way, will the City Street Fair Carnival ride setup continue in that location, or will that be relocated?
I can't speak with knowledge about that, but I don't, in everything that I've heard in the interactions, I would think it would continue to occur and in a slightly bigger lot. So I don't think that would need to be interrupted physically for any reason.
Okay. And just a quick comment on the electric charging stations, and this would be a final design item, absolutely. But it would seem that if those electric charging stations were relocated to the angled parking off of Ventura Boulevard, then that electric charging station, those 2 spaces could be used in that way whenever the parking lot is occupied with other events like farmers market. And that's just okay.
Yeah.
And then
since the sidewalk will be interrupted and worked on. Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's a good point, but then also we want to make sure that the street parking is more accessible. And if people don't have electric vehicles and they couldn't use those spots, and then also the opposite is true too, that when people are charging, sometimes they can be in that spot for several hours. And so we did want to have that in the parking field and not on the street, preferably.
That makes sense. And then on Dizdar Park, I just wanted to clarify that the letter that was written by Judith, I didn't quite catch her last name. I did read the letter. She was concerned about the major ficus tree. Was she referring to the one, do you know, that's next to Ventura Boulevard, or was one of those 2 trees that are going to be removed as a part of the parking lot improvements? a major significant ficus tree.
I believe she was referring to one. Her name is Mrs. Laurentowski. It's a tree that's located on Glen Drive and would be at the southwest corner of the park, and it may be impacted when they reorient the driveway access along the southern perimeter of the park.
Okay, so that is one of the two trees that are scheduled for removal then,
Yes.
on concept 2. Okay.
Correct.
All right, that's all the questions that I have. If there are there any further questions, comments? No, then, Mr. Goodell, I want to thank you once again for your excellent presentation. And yes, very, very well done. And I can, since you've already handled the two public comments or mentioned them, I'm going to close the public testimony portion of this, and I think we can get into commissioner comments on this particular matter. Okay? And so, moving into commissioner comments, would anyone like to, and I see Mr. Edsall's hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that the fact that this whole procedure went through public hearings and neighborhood input, that all three of these plans received a lot of input. So what we're getting tonight is kind of the finished product with a lot of people looking at it and considering it, mulling it over. So I was real happy with the number 2 on both the courthouse project and the Dizdar Park, and I would support that too, that is recommended, especially based on the input we got from all the citizens that they were satisfied with that concept as well. So, thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Edsall. Anyone else like to comment? Go ahead, Gene.
Yes, I first want to compliment Mr. Goodell and his team for, I think, doing a very exhaustive outreach program with the various community meetings with the council, and inviting the Planning Commission to sit in. And I think what we see is a great synthesis of the ideas that came forward, and there's plenty of reasons why we do something and why we don't do some other things. And I think we see the fruits of that extensive effort. And I strongly support option 2 for both the courthouse property and Didzar Park. I find them very exciting, and I think it's a great thing to look forward to. It's a great community asset. And I have heard myself a number of comments, well, the city doesn't care about Old Town, and, well, this shows that there's a significant effort to really improve conditions. And I think this is a great step in that direction to positively say, yes, we do care about Old Town. It is important, and I think things we can do to enhance the quality of life of the residents, and there's many more to come because there's a number of projects out there. I think this is the right thing to do. So I strongly support both concepts as they have been presented. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Talmadge. Mr. Espinosa, please.
Yeah, I think along in support of what Gene just said, I appreciate very much the work that went into this over this, year and a half period or longer, and the results, yielded some really nice plans. And design concept 2, for both of them, I fully support. I do have a concern with Dizdar Park concept 2 with just that one issue, which I hope that they look at and maybe, visit that particular matter as far as event booth placement, because if you don't hear about it now, you probably will later when you do have a concert performance down the road as that park gets used in the way I would expect it to be used. Thank you.
All right. right, thank you, Mr. Espinosa. And Ms. Vandermeulen, please.
Well, I was probably one of the odd people out because my favorite for the courthouse use-wise was to have the park area along Ventura Boulevard. And, but unfortunately, I also thought of a few disadvantages to doing that. But I thought having the park along the street would have been a really nice addition when you drive down the street. But where it's sitting now with the plan that was a favorite of most people, I have to say it has a lot to offer. And I'd just like to see a or something up there. And when it gets done, it'll be really, really pretty and really nice. So, and I was also in favor of the same plan for Dessert Park. And I love the entrance at the corner with the archways and stuff. So they're going to be a very nice addition to downtown. And I think they'll get a lot more use than they do now. So that would be good.
All right, thank you. All right. Yes, both Plan 2s look great to me. I'm impressed with the level of effort that went to developing the 3 plans for each site and the city's invitation to the public to come out and roll up their sleeves and be a part of that process. And based on what I had seen before tonight and what I saw tonight, I believe that the public had a very good opportunity to get involved with this as well. So I can certainly support recommending to City Council to move forward with the final concept plans for these 2 sites. And I think without any further comments from the commissioners, did I get everyone? I did. That we can call for a resolution.
Mr. Chairman, I don't see that there's a resolution.
Correct.
See, as a suggested action is for us to recommend to the City Council approval of the final design concepts.
All right. So should we go ahead and take a vote on that, or should we go ahead and vote on it?
Yes, please.
Then let's go ahead and do that. Thank you, Mr. Talmadge, and why don't we start with you?
I make a motion that we approve the design concepts as presented and that we recommend to the City Council approval of said concepts.
All right. Do we have a second on that?
Yeah, I second that motion with just clarification that we're recommending concept 2 on both projects.
Okay. I agree with the clarification.
All right. So it's been moved by Mr. Talmadge, seconded by Mr. Edsel, with the clarification that we are talking about Plan 2 for each of these 2 sites. And now we can go ahead and vote on that. So Mr. Talmadge?
Aye. Yes.
Excellent. Ms. Vandermeulen?
I approve.
Mr. Edsel?
I vote yes.
Mr. Espinosa?
I vote yes.
All right, and I vote yes as well. So the motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. How's everyone doing out there? Is anyone interested in taking a short break, or are we good to keep rolling right on through? Anyone? I don't see any hands up, so I'm going to take that as a let's keep rolling. So that brings us to item 8 of the public hearing. Proposed ordinance amending and restating Chapter 19.56 of the Camarillo Municipal Code regarding accessory dwelling units. Do we have a staff report for that, please?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Murphy. We will have a presentation by Oksana Buck on this agenda item.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Murphy and the members of the Planning Commission. Last year, the state passed new legislation pertaining to accessory dwelling units. The legislation went into effect on January 1st, and the city must now update its accessory dwelling unit regulations to be in compliance with the state. Because of the extent of the new state regulations, it's necessary to complete a comprehensive revision of Chapter 19.56 of the Camarillo Municipal Code regarding accessory dwelling units. What's wrong? Oh, there we go. The accessory dwelling regulations are included in Chapter 19.56 of the Camarillo Municipal Code. This chapter has 12 sections as listed on the slide. In the following slides, I'll provide an overview of each section. The first section provides intent of the chapter. The intent of the chapter is to permit ADUs in conformance with the state law in designated zones subject to standards that will ensure that the units contribute to a suitable living environment for people of all ages and economic levels, while preserving the integrity and character of residential neighborhoods in a manner consistent with the city's general plan, including the community design element. The next section provides definitions. The first one is accessory dwelling unit, or ADU. It means a residential dwelling that provides complete independent living facilities for one or more persons and is located on a lot with a proposed or existing primary residence that may be either a single family or a multifamily dwelling. An ADU must include permanent provisions for living, sleeping, eating, cooking, and sanitation on the same parcel that the single family or multifamily dwelling is or will be situated. And an accessory dwelling unit is also includes efficiency units, which are 150 square feet, as well as manufactured homes. Next, it includes 5 definitions for different types of ADUs that are discussed throughout the chapter. The first one is attached ADU. It shares at least one common wall with the primary dwelling, so you could think of an addition. Another one is attached ADU. It's a separate structure, does not share a common wall with the primary dwelling. A third one's internal ADU that's fully contained within the primary dwelling unit, such as room conversion. A junior ADU is also fully contained within the primary dwelling, but it's limited to 500 square feet. And lastly, a 2-story attached ADU that's attached to the primary dwelling unit but is taller than 16 feet or is 2 stories. We have a definition for accessory structure, which is a structure that's accessory and incidental to a dwelling located on the same lot. And public transit, which includes Camarillo Metrolink station or a fixed bus route with regular service covering a significant portion of the city that's not a subscription service. The next section is the permitting process for ADUs. Most ADUs will be approved by a zone clearance, which is an over-the-counter approval. A plan review will only be required when we have an attached ADU that's over 16 feet in height or is a 2-story ADU. It's still an administrative process, but not over-the-counter. It is a state requirement that all ADUs are reviewed administratively and within 60 days or less. The next section includes regulations on where ADUs are allowed. ADUs are allowed on legal lots with an existing or proposed single-family residence in the residential zones listed on the slide. ADUs are also allowed on legal lots with existing or proposed multifamily residence in the zones also listed on the slide. The next section addresses the number of ADUs that are allowed. On a single-family parcel, 1 ADU is allowed, and that's one of the 5 that we just went over: attached, detached, internal, junior, or 2-story attached. There is one case where you may have up to 2 ADUs, and those are only allowed for proposals that include a detached ADU and a junior ADU. No other combinations would allow 2 ADUs on one site. Multifamily parcel allows at least 1 internal ADU with up to a maximum of 25% of existing number of multifamily units within an existing dwelling structure. An example would be an 8-unit multifamily building could add up to 2 internal ADUs, that's 25%, within the portions of existing structure that's not used as living space. And in addition, multifamily parcels can have up to 2 detached ADUs. The next section includes various development standards for the ADUs. The table on this slide shows the size and height requirements by ADU type. In the second column, you'll see for attached internal and 2-story attached ADUs, the maximum size for a 1-bedroom would be 850 square feet. For a 2-bedroom, it would be either 1,000 or 1,200 square feet, depending on the size of the lot. And the minimum size is always 150 square feet, and maximum height is 16 feet. For detached units, maximum size is also 850 square feet. Unless it's combined with a junior ADU, then it's reduced to a maximum of 800 square feet. Maximum size for 2 bedrooms for detached units is again also 1,000 or 1,200 square feet, depending on the size of the lot. Minimum size is again 150 square feet, and maximum height is 16 feet. For junior ADUs, maximum size is 500 square feet, and the height doesn't apply because it will only be it will be entirely within existing residence. Aside from height and size regulations, the ADUs must also conform to the development standards for the underlying zone, including front yard setbacks, lot coverage, and open space. However, despite any development standards for the underlying zone, there are exceptions to those standards, which include the following. Minimum side and rear yard setbacks will always be 4 feet for new construction of ADUs. And lot coverage and open space requirement must be waived if proposed ADU meets the 4-foot setback, is 800 square feet or less, and is no more than 16 feet in height. And no additional setbacks would be required for any existing structures that are being converted to an ADU. Driveway access, ADUs must be served by the same driveway as the primary dwelling, unless the ADU has access from a public alley or is located on a corner lot for which secondary access is permitted. As far as entrances, ADUs must have separate entrance, but may also be served by a common entrance with the primary dwelling unit. And for replacing or converting existing structures to ADU, any existing structure can be converted to an ADU regardless whether it conforms to the current zoning requirements, including setbacks. Existing structures can be demolished and replaced with an ADU in the same location and to the same dimensions as the demolished structure. The next section addresses design standards. The design, colors, materials, and textures of ADU must be similar or compatible with the primary dwelling unit. The next section addresses parking standards. 1 open or enclosed parking space is required per attached or detached ADU. No parking is required for internal or junior ADUs. No parking is required for conversion of existing parking structures into an ADU. So replacement parking is not required if a garage is converted. And no parking is required in any of the following instances. If ADU is located within half a mile walking distance of public transit, if ADU is located within an architecturally and historically significant district, when there is a car share located within 1 block of the ADU, and when on-street parking permits are required but not offered to the occupant of the ADU. The next section addresses ownership and occupancy requirements. No owner occupancy will be required of the ADU or the primary residence if the ADU is approved between January 1st, 2020 and December 31st, 2024. After that date, applicants must comply either by occupying either the primary dwelling unit or the ADU. If the ADU or the primary dwelling unit is not occupied by the owner and is being rented out, the rental period must be no longer than 30 consecutive days. The next section addresses regulations specifically to junior ADUs. As we mentioned previously, the maximum size is 500 square feet. A junior ADU, by definition, would include an efficiency kitchen with a cooking facility and appliances. such as sink and a refrigerator, food preparation counter, and storage cabinets that are a reasonable size in relation to the size of the junior ADU. It may be, but is not required, to include separate sanitation facilities from the primary dwelling unit, and ADU or the primary dwelling must be owner-occupied. A deed restriction must be recorded before occupancy and will be binding on all future owners of the property. The next section addresses deed restrictions. The deed restrictions must say that ADU cannot be rented for short-term vacation rentals of 30 days or less, and that an ADU may not be sold separately from the primary dwelling unit. There's a small exemption that if the unit was developed by an affordable housing developer and the unit has an affordable covenant. And the final section addresses conflicting provisions. If any provisions of the Camarillo Municipal Code conflict with any provisions of this chapter, the provisions of this chapter will control. And if any provisions of this chapter conflict with any state requirements, the state will control to the extent legally required. The suggested action for the Planning Commission is to adopt a resolution recommending approval to the City Council of the proposed ordinance, amending and restating Chapter 19.56 of the Camarillo Municipal Code. And that concludes staff presentation.
All right, thank you very much, Ms. Buck. Do we have any questions for the presenter or for city staff? Mr. Edsel, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I know we got a letter late today at about 6 from the attorney for California for homeownership, and I just wondered if staff had a chance to look at that. I mean, they're making comments about the ordinance, and actually the writer is the counsel for that nonprofit, and he gives suggested language and critiques what's wrong with this proposed ordinance. And I just wondered, I know it came in real late in the day, but did you guys have a chance to look at that? And
yes.
And provide your comment? Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Edsel. Yes, we did. And Deputy City Attorney Kane Toon is available to comment on that. We did review the letter, and he'll be responding.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Commissioner Edsel. I was actually just about to pop in and give you my thoughts on that. So, yes, we did receive a letter pretty late today, and that kind of lists a series of bullet points of concerns about the ordinance and what they claim is something that is not in compliance with state law. That's going to be included in the record in case anyone else in the public wants to take a look at it. But I did take a look through each provision, and I have to respectfully disagree with their concerns. We actually did go through all these comments, and we even vetted this with HCD, who is going to be the primary regulatory body regulating these types of ordinances. And they actually were in agreement with our proposed versions and only had a few minor changes, which Oksana did address in the staff report that we changed. For example, the removal of the limitation of the 2 bedrooms per ADU limitation. I think we referred to in the PowerPoint as 2 bedrooms, but it should really be 2 bedrooms or more. But as it stands right now, I believe, and our office believes, that this ordinance is fully consistent with state law, especially since HCD did provide comments, which we addressed, and also because of that last section that Oksana just mentioned in her last slide, where if there is going to be any inconsistency, we are interpreting it in compliance with state law as opposed to any local interpretation if there is a conflict.
That's great. Thanks for getting on that so quick. I know it didn't come until real late today, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Of course.
All right, thank you. Any further questions for city staff? Ms. Vandermeulen.
When I was reading over this, reading through it, one thing I had a problem with identifying was where garage conversions went in. And I kept looking through the descriptions for detached and internal and junior ADUs. And I kind of figured it out. But what I liked, if there's any way to include the wording that's out of the one I copied, but it wasn't all of them, the AB 881, where, let me see, accessory structures from the proposed or existing primary dwelling. Nope, back up again. Located within the existing primary dwelling, including attached garages, storage areas, and similar uses. That under the definition and where it has the junior ADU requirements, clarify for sure where garage conversions would go. And I don't know if it's possible now. And in some places, well, definitions, and a couple other places, it's safety code section number. Looking at where it says that it's a maximum of 2 people for efficiency, minimum.
Hey, Beverly, you're kind of cutting in and out there. Can you speak a little closer to your screen?
Okay. Is it better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. On the, where we mentioned the health and safety code, when we give the health and safety code, if in some areas we could put what that is instead of the code number, a maximum of 2 people and a minimum of 150 square feet. Say when you get around to talking about the area rather than the code number. To me, that would be helpful when you read the answer when the public is reading through it. And,
Beverly, for some reason, you're kind of coming in and out, and I don't know if that's just my device or.
It's cutting in and out as well here.
Yeah, I think I understand the gist of what Commissioner Vandermillion is referencing in terms of just clarifying certain provisions to address certain types of uses. I think it was just a drafting preference in our eyes because we do talk about replacing or converting existing structures, and the state law is actually a little bit broader than just garage conversions. They do mention garage conversions, but it actually allows for a little bit more than that. So we thought it was a little more accurate to say it's existing structures as opposed to IDing garages versus other types of existing structures. And also, the reason why we generally reference health and safety code sections is that's how the state law does it. So we don't want a potential issue where if something changes in the law, we would have to, we potentially would create a conflict when we have to change the ordinance definitions again. So that's generally why we tie it to a certain code section. So we just believe that's probably just easier drafting.
I thought of that downside, but then if we had the code number, and when I looked at it, it was the same in, I believe, 1998 and 2018, I thought maybe we'd be safe for a little while if we just added those parts to it, not replace the code number, but added to it. And as far as mentioning the line about the garages and such, that's, I guess just because I'm familiar with what they're talking about, and I had trouble identifying where the garage conversions fit in this, that other people might have trouble also. So that was my thought. So that's all I had on this.
I would like to share with Commissioner Vandermeulen that we appreciate that comment, and we do plan on putting together a checklist and a overview of the ordinance to provide to the public that is going to be kind of a user's guide, and so we can definitely address that in our user's guide also.
Thank you.
Mr. Espinosa.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Kane, once again on the question brought up by Commissioner Edsel, the legal questions that were raised in the public comment, which were numerous, and they were citing the government code, citing the municipal code. Were these mostly interpretive conclusions that were being drawn based on the read of the law, and that you're confident you checked us on you said that you checked with the regulatory body and they concurred with your findings and our ordinance. Is that correct?
Yes, Commissioner Espinoza, and I don't want to take credit for checking with HCD. That's actually, Oksana and ComDev staff. So, I'll give credit where credit is due. But yeah, you're right. This is a homeowners group, and they're of course going to read this very favorable to homeowners. But the fact of the matter is, this is relatively new legislation, and the most accurate source we could use to determine what the state intended at this point really is HCD. And so we've gotten their review and their comments on this, and they didn't raise any of these issues similar to what's contained in this letter to us when they gave us their feedback. So I'm pretty confident that, at least for the state, they're not going to have the same issues.
Okay, thank you. And just one quick minor thing. I noticed the maximum size on one of the charts related to one bedroom or more. There were like square footage size limitations, but it seemed to say 1 bedroom or more and 1 bedroom or less. In other words, with 1 bedroom, you could have either size apply. So I wanted to know if that was something that needed to be corrected, or if I was reading that wrong in the staff report and discussion.
I'm not sure, Commissioner, if that was incorrectly written down in the presentation, but if I direct you to page 14 of this agenda item, and on top of the page, item 3 talks about the general maximum sizes, and generally, for detached ADUs, if it's a 1 bedroom or less, it's 850, and if it is more than 1 bedroom, it's 1,000. There's some variations depending on whether it's attached, internal, attached, but those are generally the size limitations that we have.
Right, I figured that was the case, but when I read the language, it said 1 bedroom or less is this, and 1 bedroom or more is that. So it was like including the 1 bedroom and the more. You follow what I'm saying?
If that's the case, then then it should. I'd like to clarify for the record that if it's 1 bedroom or less, it's 850 square feet maximum, and if it's more than 1 bedroom, then it would be 1,000 or 1,200, depending on which lot size that.
Okay, thanks.
Good clarification. Where are we here? Mr. Talmadge, do you have any questions?
No, I have no comments at this time. It's one of those necessary evils. You just have to update the local rules in accordance with what the state does. So, no comment.
All right, thank you. And my only comment has to do with our RHNA goals and whether we can, in complying with the state mandate here, come closer to meeting our lower income housing goals. We look at our RHNA plan every year, and I'd love to be able to get close to that. The city has some very nice projects that are in the works to add low and lower income housing units to the city. I'm wondering whether we can qualify, whether some of these units, because they would be going for well below market rate, I would think, could qualify for lower income. And I've discussed that already, and I believe the answer is that they would qualify for moderate income, but not low income. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We include those as moderate income units in our RHNA reporting.
Can you please repeat that, Oksana?
Sure. Yes, that's correct. The accessory dwelling units are counted towards our moderate income RHNA.
Okay, and there's no way that some of those could qualify for the lower income? Not an avenue for that?
Not without deed restrictions, no.
Got it. Yeah. All right. Well, I think Public testimony has been open and closed. The letter that Kane referred to and addressed, and some follow-up questions were made to, is the only public comment that I'm aware of, and nobody is calling in tonight on this, so we can close the public testimony and open it up for commissioner comments, recommendations. Anyone want to start?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Edsel.
Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. We're just having to bring our city ordinance to comply with state law, and so I'd call for resolution.
All right. Is everyone in agreement with that, or would anyone else like to speak about that? We're all good? Yeah? Then why don't we go ahead and call for a resolution on it?
Okay, thank you, Chairman Murphy. Resolution number PC 2020-09, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Camarillo recommending approval to the City Council of an ordinance amending and restating Chapter 19.56 of the Camarillo Municipal Code regarding accessory dwelling units.
Would anyone care to make a motion?
I'll move to waive further reading and vote for adoption.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved by Commissioner Edsel, seconded by Commissioner Espinosa. And let's go ahead and vote. Mr. Talmadge?
Yes.
Ms. Vandermeulen?
Yes.
Mr. Edsel?
Yes.
Mr. Espinosa?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well, so it carries 5-0. Thank you very much. All right, moving right along to item 9, public hearing, proposed ordinance adding chapter 19.67 to the Camarillo Municipal Code regarding the plan review process. May we have a staff report on that, please?
The proposed ordinance adds a new chapter, 19.67, to the Camarillo Municipal Code. This chapter consolidates the city's existing plan review procedures from various sections of the code into one single chapter, and it further streamlines our municipal code. The new plan review chapter includes 4 sections: the plan review application, review and decision by the community development director, appeals to the planning commission, and appeals to city council. The procedures included in the new chapter are the same procedures as we've had before, but they simply are organized into one location of the Camarillo Municipal Code. The suggested action for the Planning Commission is to adopt a resolution recommending approval to the City Council of the proposed ordinance, adding Chapter 19.57 to the Camarillo Municipal Code. And
excellent, thank you on that. Do we have any comments from the commissioners on this one? Or questions, I'm sorry, for staff? I think I see none. And I understand that there are no public comments for this one as well, so we can open and close the public testimony on that. And yes? Someone say something? And so we can move right into commissioner comments on this action. And does anyone have any comments on this? Go ahead, Mr. Edsel.
Yeah, this is pretty straightforward. They aren't changing anything. They're just making it more efficient to find and by putting in a single chapter. So, unless there's anybody that has a concern, I'd call for resolution as well.
That's great. Does anyone else wish to speak on this? Yeah, the only thing go ahead, Mr. Coleman.
No, I concur with Chairman, Commissioner Edsel.
I concur as well. It is a sort of a housekeeping issue, but it does bring together in one place the various procedures required for plan check and whatnot. So I think we should proceed with the resolution and recommendation of approval by the planning.
That's great. Let me see if there's anyone else who would like to speak on it. I don't see anyone. And yeah, I agree. Whoever thought this up, by the way, I think is brilliant. It really does streamline the requirements, and it makes it so that you don't have to keep going back from one application to another to see what the plan review requirements are. So I fully support this kind of streamlining. Can we have a call for resolution?
Yes, thank you, Chairman Murphy. Resolution number PC 2020-10, a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Camarillo recommending approval to the City Council of an ordinance adding Chapter 19.76 to the Camarillo Municipal Code regarding the plan review procedures.
I move that we waive any further reading and make a motion to adopt the resolution.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Espinosa, seconded by Mr. Edsel. Let's go ahead and vote on it. Mr. Talmadge?
Yes.
Ms. Vandermeulen?
Yes.
Mr. Edsel?
Yes.
And Mr. Espinosa?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. The motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, can we take a 2-minute stretcher break?
Yes, we may.
If that's okay with everybody.
Absolutely. I'm going to put myself on mute and come back.
Okay.
So we'll be back to reinstate the meeting in we'll say 5 minutes, just so everyone's on the same page. Thank you.
All right, thanks. We'll see you in a little bit.
Okay, we're just getting our system back online, so we should be ready to transition to our consultant, Michael Brown, momentarily. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman Murphy and members of the Planning Commission. It's been several months that we have been working on this with staff, and very collaborative process, and it's a real pleasure to present our updated CEQA environmental guidelines to you this evening. Let's see, just taking a look. Oh, hold on. So, the city has had environmental guidelines in the past, and they were essentially a copy, if you will, of the state CEQA guidelines. And so when we started this process, it was with several intents to make the document more usable for the city. Specifically, we wanted to adopt revised environmental guidelines that will guide staff and the public through the environmental review process. It will assist consultants working for the city in the consistent use of methodologies and thresholds to evaluate project impacts, to make the CEQA review process more efficient for the city of Camarillo, the public, and you, the decision makers. It's also to provide greater legal protection for the city in the event that environmental documents are challenged in court by adopting specific thresholds of significance that are applicable to the city of Camarillo. And it is to produce a living document that can be easily updated as necessary to address changes to the state CEQA guidelines or changes to thresholds of significance by other applicable agencies. So as I discussed at the beginning, we've been working on this for several months, and we began this process by having several staff meetings where we went through thresholds of significance that have been used in the past by not only the city, but other agencies as well, to determine what we felt was most appropriate for the city. We then presented information to the City Council in a study session in October of 2018, and the Council, upon hearing the presentation, directed staff to continue to develop the thresholds for the updated guidelines. We followed that up with additional city staff meetings to further identify and clarify the thresholds of significance and obtain additional input from other agencies that would be that have input into projects that go through the city. We then went back to the City Council for another study session on December 11th of 2019 to review the proposed thresholds of significance, largely because these thresholds are the heart of the updated guidelines. Following that study session, city staff and our firm prepared the draft copy of the updated environmental guidelines for presentation, for publication and presentation at a community workshop. That occurred on March 3rd of this year. And the document was available for several weeks for review. So following that, city staff, along with our firm, prepared a draft and a final draft copy of the environmental guidelines that were prepared for the presentation for you this evening. Unlike most environmental type of analyses that come before this body here, the update to the city's CEQA environmental guidelines is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA as it's referred to, under the state CEQA guidelines. And this is because the proposed resolution to adopt the environmental guidelines will not result in a direct or reasonably foreseeable indirect physical change in the environment. And also because the ordinance is covered by the common sense exemption that CEQA applies only to projects which have the potential for causing a significant effect on the environment. Additionally, according to a recent California Supreme Court case of the California Building Industry Association versus the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, an update to the city's environmental guidelines involving thresholds of significance is not a project as defined by CEQA, because the environmental guidelines do not have an effect on the environment that is direct or a reasonably foreseeable indirect physical change in the environment. Furthermore, the guidelines only set forth the city's guidelines for environmental review, and any project reviewed under the updated city environmental guidelines will undergo its own environmental review. Therefore, no additional environmental review is necessary in order to recommend adoption or to adopt the environmental guidelines. Some additional information that brings you up to date on some changes that have occurred versus previous analyses in the past versus the way that things are going, not only in Camarillo but throughout the state, is that the updated environmental guidelines, if adopted, will apply to projects filed with the city after the date of adoption of the guidelines. The environmental documents for projects that were filed prior to the adoption of the environmental guidelines are not subject to the environmental guidelines proposed within this update. I would like to note for you, however, that several projects are in the pipeline right now, and although the analyses are not required to comply with these guidelines since they've not been adopted yet, they are being prepared consistent with what is generally proposed in them. So you wouldn't see a substantial difference with these projects that are coming out in the near future. Also, environmental documents circulated for public review prior to July 1st of this year are not subject to the vehicle miles traveled analysis that is now mandated under CEQA. That took effect a while ago, but lead agencies in California are not required to implement that until July 1st of this year. Also, and this is probably the biggest change from what you may have seen in the past, is that after July 1st of this year, a project cannot be evaluated for environmental impacts based on transportation levels of service analysis. Also, which is basically vehicle congestion and delay referenced in terms of LOS. However, the LOS analyses can proceed in the future, and the project impacts be mitigated as a development impact. That means that you will not see the analysis in the environmental document, but the analysis can be used for the development of conditions of approval should the projects move forward. So now we start getting into the environmental factors that are the heart of the environmental guidelines update here. What we have listed on this chart here are the environmental factors that are identified in the state CEQA guidelines, the Appendix G and Appendix M to those to the guidelines there. Items in red are the recent changes that have been adopted by the state for the guidelines. The items in green are the changes that staff are recommending to be specific to the city's environmental guidelines here. You can see, for example, we've enhanced the aesthetics topic by including visual resources. The state factor for agricultural and forestry resources, we are recommending that and forestry be stricken because there are no forestry resources within the city of Camarillo or its sphere of influence. As we stated in the introduction to this presentation here, that one of the goals of the guidelines update is to streamline the review of documents. And so what we have done is we have taken the tribal cultural resources that you see sort of near the end of this chart, and we've included it with the cultural resources. And that's because when an archaeologist does a cultural resource analysis, especially here in Camarillo and elsewhere in California, though, you are generally looking for prehistoric Native American resources. And so we felt it was more efficient to combine those under one topic there. Under noise, we've added and vibration. Vibration has always been included in the noise topic of the checklist, but we just want to sort of highlight that we are looking at that as well. For public services, we incorporated recreation. We brought it up from the next one and combined the two because you're looking at parks and other recreation services when you're looking at public services. Transportation, you will see that that the state has stricken traffic from that. And once again, that's because they have taken out the ability of lead agencies to look at congestion as far as impacts. So now we're looking at transportation impacts as far as specifically focusing on reductions of vehicle miles traveled. And then the two new topics that were added more recently were energy and wildfire. Under CEQA, environmental impacts are generally determined to be either no impact, where the project would have no direct or indirect impact on the environment for that topic, a less than significant impact, where the project will have some effect, but the impact is not substantially adverse. It can be less than significant with mitigation incorporated. And what that is, where you identify a potentially significant impact associated with the project, but mitigation is identified to reduce that impact to a less than significant level. And then you have the potentially significant impact. And that's where the analysis shows that there may be a direct or indirect impact on the environment of the project. And we do not know at this time whether that impact can be reduced to a less than significant level, or we know that it cannot be. So what we have in the following slides then will be the issue areas that we are recommending, as well as the specific thresholds of significance that are recommended for the city here. And you will see what we are recommending for the determination of no impact, less than significant, potentially significant. Once again, on the following charts here, we're going to go through the significance criteria. Now, I am certainly not going to read everything to you because, we all want to get to bed before the sun comes up. But what I would like to do is highlight the changes in green that staff are recommending and just briefly talk about what they are and why we are recommending them. So for item A here, before I go into that, let me just say, if you see something in white, that means under the significance criteria column there, that means that is the recommended wording that's in the state CEQA guidelines. Where you see green, those are our changes from those state CEQA guidelines that we are recommending to be specific to Camarillo. So under item A here, have a substantial adverse effect on a scenic vista that is visible from a city scenic corridor. The general plan identifies what the scenic corridors are in the city. And so we want to be specific to focusing on the impacts from those areas. For item B, basically, although we are changing all of the wording here, it's only to be consistent with the city's general plan information here. We are not changing the intent of the CEQA guidelines. So what we are recommending is the wording of substantially alter or damage a scenic resource that is visible from a city scenic corridor. In addition to defining the scenic corridors for the city, the general plan also identifies what the scenic resources are within the city. Those basically pertain to agriculture, open space, historic sites, and waterways. For item C, once again, a change that's recommended to focus on Camarillo while still continuing the intent of the state CEQA guidelines. And that is conflict with inapplicable general plan policies or zoning regulations governing scenic quality. We're focusing on, whereas the state guidelines are very generic and would apply to, projects all around, we are saying you're looking at the general plan policies and zoning regulations for this agency here. No change to D. For agricultural resources, we are not recommending any changes to what the state has in their state CEQA guidelines. We are only identifying our recommended thresholds of significance that are particular to Camarillo. Now, one thing we'd like to point out is that in March, as part of the city's outreach for the guidelines here, the city received comments from the Ventura County Agricultural Commissioner's Office regarding agricultural resources. And specifically, the Commissioner's Office recommended that some wording be changed from what we were recommending in the thresholds pertaining to item B. We looked at the recommendation from the agricultural commissioner. We concurred with it, and so we made a minor text change to the specific threshold there. You can see that in the third item there. So and all of this was specific to lands that are subject to Williamson Act contracts. For air quality, we're not recommending any real changes to what the intent of the Appendix G thresholds are. We are just focusing on the plans and emissions that are of concern in Ventura County as identified by the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District. So we just changed the generic wording to the current general Ventura County Air Quality Management Plan for item A. And for item B, we focus on the emissions of reactive organic compounds and nitrogen oxides, which are the pollutants of concern, the regional pollutants of concern here in the county, and that have specific thresholds of significance recommended by the APCD. For item C, we've added the specific issues of concern that were identified to us by the APCD. And for item D here, we just provide a little clarification that was also recommended by the APCD pertaining to the creation of objectionable odors. For biological resources, we're not recommending any changes, only identifying the specific thresholds of significance, which basically pertain to the standards of agencies such as the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So nothing out of the ordinary here. There was one change here that I'll discuss on the next page here for item C. So in March, the city received a comment from the Ventura County Public Works Watershed Permits and Planning Division regarding this topic here. And they just were requesting a change to that item C. And whereas the state's CEQA guidelines identify impacts to a protected resource, they asked if we would add the language regulated and or to that. So it'd be regulated and or protected. We concurred with that and staff have added that. For cultural resources and tribal cultural resources, we've only had a little bit of text to clarify where the threshold is, the criteria is referring to as far as section 15064.5. So just clarifying that it is of the state CEQA guidelines. No other changes are recommending. And here we have items C and D are the items that we've incorporated from tribal cultural resources. We've not changed the wording. We've just combined the two to be more efficient. Energy is the new topic. We've incorporated the wording and identified our thresholds. Geology and soils, we're not recommending any changes from what the state recommends and these are also what the city uses as in their standard review of development projects. Hazards and hazardous materials, I do not believe we are recommending any changes there. Oh, here at the end, what we are recommending, whereas items E and F, item E pertains to just to development near airports. And so we are just changing the wording to indicate that this pertains to Camarillo Airport. And for item F, we're changing the wording there because it pertains to evacuation routes and the city's general plan identifies or designates evacuation routes. And so we're just doing that to make it consistent with the general plan here. Hydrology and water quality, we are not recommending any changes. Just identifying our recommended thresholds. And then in March, the city received 2 comments from the Ventura County Public Works Watershed Permits and Planning Division regarding this topic. And the first comment pertained to clarification in the guidelines discussion that Ventura County Watershed Protection District has jurisdiction over red line channels within the county. And that comment was incorporated into the text of the environmental guidelines. And the second comment pertained to a few items here. And the district was requesting that the city consider the 100-year storm in the design standards and using a more restrictive condition such as a 10-year developed condition peak. These recommendations were evaluated by the city's Public Works Department and reviewed against previous environmental review documents analyzed by the city. And the following design criteria currently exist in the city's local stormwater runoff requirements, and that is the evaluation of 50-year flows contained within the storm drain system, and that structures are protected from the 100-year flows. So these principles are consistent not only with the city's current practice, but also with other public agencies. Therefore, the the second comment here from the county was not incorporated into the draft environmental guidelines. Tally is here this evening so that she could answer or provide any additional information that you may have regarding this once the presentation is completed. For land use and planning, we've added some text just to clarify that we're dealing with the City of Camarillo general plan rather than a generic general plan for item B. And with regards to the land use and planning topic, the city received a comment from Eric Fruth, a resident of the city, regarding the topic here. And the comment recommended that in criteria A, physically divide an established neighborhood or community that has the potential significant impact, would divide an existing neighborhood, but provide pedestrian or public transit connection. And staff reviewed this, and we modified and incorporated into the threshold of significance by stating that the project divides an established neighborhood but provides for connection through the design of the project. Mineral resources here, we are not recommending any changes, but the original proposal was for item A only with the exclusion of item B, which brings us to this comment that the city received yesterday from the Ventura County Coalition of Labor, Agriculture, and Business regarding this topic. And they asked that item B from the state CEQA guidelines be included based on information that they provided. And upon evaluation, we agreed, and item B has been re-added to the checklist as an area of evaluation. For noise and vibration here, item A in the state CEQA guidelines pertains to the generation of temporary or permanent increases in noise levels. What we did is break those down. So we have an item A here that pertains to short-term temporary construction noise levels, and an item B that addresses temporary non-construction or permanent increases in noise levels. So basically, we just broke those two up so that we could separate our construction analyses from operational analyses a bit cleaner in our environmental documents going forward. Just a little clarification on item C, because ground board noise levels are vibrations, so we just felt that was redundant. And then for item D, which pertains to noise levels near airports, we've just changed it to be specific to operations from Camarillo Airport. For population and housing, we're not recommending any changes, but we did receive a letter from Eric Fruth, the resident of Camarillo, regarding this topic, and he asked that that threshold criteria be be expanded to include thresholds for the demolition of affordable housing units. And so that recommendation was not included in the actual thresholds that we're recommending, and that's because Senate Bill 330 contains a provision to reconstruct protected units, and that state law would preclude the ability of the city to adopt a statement of overriding considerations to allow for the demolition of protected units without the replacements being constructed. However, the comment was addressed with a section added to the environmental guidelines in the population and housing topic to provide clarification on SB 330's requirements for these kinds of protected units. Public services and recreation, no recommended changes other than our guidelines, other than our specific thresholds here, but the items B and C are the incorporation of recreation, or the redirection, if you will. Now, back as part of the outreach here the city has been working with the Pleasant Valley Recreation and Park District on this issue, and they received comments on it back in February. And the comment focused on a clarification that the general plan identifies a ratio of 2.5 acres of community parks and 2.5 acres of neighborhood parks per 1,000 residents, where the guidelines, as they were originally proposed, only identified 5 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents. And their comment also clarified the correct number of parks run by the district. And so we've revised the guidelines to reflect the information that the park district provided. Transportation and traffic. Once again, traffic is eliminated, and we have provided just a little clarification under item B, indicating that that section of the CEQA guidelines pertains to the reduction of VMT. Utilities and service systems. The only change that we are recommending there is to build on the work that not only the city, but the other water purveyors within the city boundaries have done in addressing the requirements for new development projects. So basically, projects have to comply with the water supply and reduction requirements in order for an impact to be less than significant. Wildfire is a new topic, and the only change that we have recommending is just text added to the introduction at the top that specifies the areas that are identified in the City of Camarillo's general plan safety element. And under the mandatory findings of significance that are required under CEQA, we are not recommending any changes. So the staff suggested action is adoption of a resolution recommending approval of the proposed CEQA environmental guidelines to the city council, and myself, staff, are all available for any questions that you may have regarding the document, the proposed thresholds of significance, or anything else in the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. That's a great presentation. There's a lot of work behind the proposed amendments to this document. We very much appreciate all the efforts that have gone into that process. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Brown or for city staff on this? Mr. Talmadge.
Yes, good evening. Good to see you again, Mr. Brown. Actually, I didn't see your video, but I heard you. Thank you. I also really appreciate all of the effort that's gone into this, not only from the consultant level, but staff level. This is a significant achievement to take this on. We had a discussion, and you did not mention that the CEQA guidelines, as amended and changed, included new appendices, M as in Mike and N as in November, M regarding infill, and N regarding a checklist for infill projects. And I did not see any mention of that, of adding it to the guidelines. I think that it's important to do so because that's a lot of what we're going to be seeing in terms of development within the city of Camarillo are infill projects. So I think that our own CEQA guidelines for the city should include those two appendices. Comment?
Yes, we certainly appreciate the information and input that you have provided to us on this, especially with regards to that topic. And actually, there's the final draft document that was submitted to the Planning Commission here. That's the latest document that you have. You will find in the in the guidelines there, not only a discussion of it's in the introduction part to it, but there's a new discussion of infill projects and the requirements from them, and we have also created an entire new checklist that is that is consistent with Appendix N that has been added to the final draft document.
Okay, great. I thought so. I just wanted a little clarification for the understanding of the rest of the committee. I think that's all I have for you right now, but I will have comments afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Talmadge. Do we have any other questions for Mr. Brown and for staff from the commissioners? Mr. Etzel, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I had a comment. Matter of fact, that was something complicated that you made pretty simple and easy to follow and understand, so I appreciated the presentation. The question I had was, and we received today from a law firm, that Silverstein law firm, and it referenced this agenda item, but it seemed to me they were talking about a project that wasn't before us at all. I just wondered if since it was submitted as a public comment part, are there any comments from staff or the consultant on that letter that we received dated May 4th?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Etzel. I would actually appreciate it if Deputy City Attorney Kane Thune could present himself on Zoom and let the Commission know that we did analyze that letter and that we have addressed some comments raised in that letter, and I would appreciate it if Kane, Deputy City Attorney Thune, would come on the Zoom.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Yes, Commissioner Etzel, we did have an opportunity to review this with the City Attorney's Office and with staff as well. Essentially, the letter had three main comments. One was really incorporating some of the comments made by another county agency, which I believe the consultant and Tally have addressed and incorporated or have addressed in their presentation. The other comments are really, well, what's the CEQA exemption for this? And really, right now, this is a recommendation to the City Council. And I believe the consultant has mentioned as well, this fits under the common sense exemption, and also there's case law that says adopting threshold of significance is not in itself a project. So I think we are good there, and the letter doesn't present any concerns from us.
Great, thank you. That's kind of what I thought when I read through it, but I appreciate you commenting on it.
That's great. Thank you, Mr. Etzel. Mr. Espinosa, any questions?
It's a couple. So these two letters that we received today, they just came in today and yesterday. Is that correct? From public?
Yes, that is correct. The most recent ones, yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I mean, I think that it's unfortunate, that they came at the 11th hour, because it is, I mean, I certainly would hope that we get more lead time in reviewing letters related to what are being called into, like, legal consideration. So, but there's nothing much we can do when they come in at this late hour. So I appreciate you jumping on that as quick as you did. I think even one of them made it into your PowerPoint. So thank you for addressing those. I wanted to ask if there's a need to actually restate the city adopting by reference the state CEQA guidelines in this process, or if that's just something that is just retained throughout, and the only thing you really ever have to modify and address are the changes to the city's established guidelines that are tailored to the city's considerations.
There is a statement within the guidelines that does that, if you will. that says that we incorporate the state CEQA guidelines, and that the differences here are what are tailored for the city. But we certainly can't exempt ourselves from any of the other aspects of CEQA, so those are incorporated.
All right, okay, thank you. That was all I had. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Espinosa. Ms. Vandermeulen?
Okay. Well, I have to say, when I first started reading through this, I felt like I needed to go to school for about a week. But I did find it was very explanatory, and easy to go through, and easy to understand and see what's where on it. Now I know where to look for everything that I need to check on through here. And I really didn't have much in the way of questions. The only thing I had a question on is when I got down to the checklist towards the end on page 95, factors affected. Question of if something's been approved and researched on a prior EIR or an earlier EIR and we don't look at it again, is there any timeline on that? Or how long would these be apt to stretch out? I was thinking, like, if you did a traffic study 3 years ago, would it still be applicable today if we were looking at something after the fact?
Let's see. I'm sorry. Once again, I apologize. You're cutting in and out a little bit there. So, are you talking about the checklist for the infill projects?
What page is it again, Beverly?
Page 95. 95. It's under, after City of Camarillo CEQA environmental checklist.
Let me get there.
I know. And what we were discussing as far as going through the check.
Let's see. I'm sorry. So 95.
Well, it says on page 95. It says page 84.
So it's the Planning Commission item 10, page 95. And I think the response is that we have to determine whether or not the environmental analysis is stale, so to speak, on a case-by-case basis. And we have to look at what the conditions are when an application is filed. So it's hard to answer the question with the broad brush because a traffic study that was done 3 years ago may be stale if the surrounding area and the project property where the traffic study was analyzed is all developed in a different way. But if it was the same and nothing had happened and circumstances had not changed significantly, then there is an opportunity to potentially reuse prior environmental analysis. If we can justify that under today's circumstances, it's substantially similar or the same as what was originally analyzed.
So if we do see that there's been a change, we can still go and
It's very tough to hear you, Beverly. If you could speak up a little bit, please.
It's, I just wanted to make sure that if we do feel there's been a change, that we could reevaluate it. So.
Yes, we can reevaluate it, but if a project was approved and it had environmental analysis and all the zoning is the same and the circumstances are generally the same, then we could also consider using prior environmental analysis if it's determined to still be consistent with what was originally analyzed and there haven't been any significant changes.
Thank you.
Okay, and I have just a comment or two. I think that's everyone, unless anyone else has further comment. Gene, go ahead, Mr. Talmadge. No? Okay. I appreciate, Gene, Gene, you're muted. You need to unmute.
Sorry. Are we going to have another opportunity to just comment in general, or is this our shot at it, and then we move to resolution?
That's a good question. Joe, it sort of rolled a little bit into the...
I think you're on comments, but it sounded like all the questions had been asked. I think we should just stick with, if there are any other questions, we can field those questions, but then it sounds like you've already kind of digressed in the comments. So I'd turn it back over to you, Chairman Murphy.
All right, and I do have a few comments. Gene, if you have something further to ask about, feel free to. I'll give you another chance after this, okay? Yes. I do appreciate, Mr. Brown, all that you've done to incorporate comments coming from all the different agencies. I've got, and my list is not complete, but the Ag Commissioner's Office, APCD, Ventura County Public Works Department, Ventura County Watershed Protection District, Mr. Fruth, the VC Coalition, and City Parks and Rec. The one comment that from the Watershed Protection District was not addressed, as I understand it, and reading through the background letters from Watershed Protection District, it wasn't clear to me that Ventura County wanted the city of Camarillo to actually revise their environmental impact guidelines to address a difference in the way flood or additional flow from a site is evaluated. So it wasn't clear to me that that's what they were actually looking for. Is that part of why this was not addressed with Watershed Protection District? And I'm referring specifically to the difference between holding back the Q10 increase with the Q100.
Right. The county would prefer that the city evaluate drainage conditions assuming 100-year flows. And it's been the city's practice for quite a while to evaluate 50-year. So they are, in essence, and they have been for a while, have been asking the city to change the way that they evaluate the drainage for development projects. Tally can certainly provide the much greater information on this if you'd like to hear it.
Well, my main point is I don't know that it's a matter of our review of the environmental guidelines to get into the weeds on the difference in how the county and the city evaluates this. I guess what I'm suggesting is it should not be involved.
Right.
It just doesn't seem like it's the right place. It's getting into methodology rather than concept. Hey, Callie.
Hi, how are you doing, Mr. Chair? Planning Commissioners. So it appears the county just wanted us to, they were asking the city to consider the 100-year in our, standards. If you read through their letters, they write, our understanding is that the city uses Q50. So they did not call and talk to me to get a better understanding. So they did not realize that we do already consider the 100-year flow. Basically, we are a design storm. Our design storm is Q50. But we do look for structures, pad protection to the Q100, which is consistent throughout the county. So their understanding was just not quite up to what the city does when they made the statement. So we put in the slide what we do, and that is the 50-year Q design and check pad protection for 100.
Excellent. I appreciate that.
Just added that clarification, and each city has their own level design queue with combinations of detention to address it. As you know, Oxnard very flat, hard to get slopes on pipes, so sometimes in parking lots when you visit the shopping centers, there are signs that there's going to be ponding or some kind of flooding during a rain event. In Camarillo, we do not allow that kind of ponding.
One size doesn't fit all. Okay. Appreciate that. Okay, Mr. Talmadge, did you have further comment, questions?
Yes, more comments than really questions. As I indicated, thank you to Mr. Brown and his consulting team, along with staff, in looking at this. What I was encouraged to see, the update of the guidelines, everybody has to do because the state changed the guidelines. The change actually came about in December of 2018, and then were actually published in 2019. And it's not, I'm not saying that the city or anyone was dragging their feet. What came along with this change in the guidelines for the city was something that's brand new to the city, and that's the thresholds of significance. And that starts, it really puts into words a lot of the standards by which impacts are measured, whether they're significant, not significant, or whatever. And that's a notable achievement to have. The CEQA wonks at the state have been after many, many jurisdictions to do exactly this. And some people ignore it, some people don't. But when you recognize what's the purpose of the guidelines are really a checklist that the applicant comes in with a particular project, and then the CEQA process is that that project is initially analyzed in terms of this checklist, the guidelines, to determine whether or not there's really any impact or not. And that forms what's called the initial study. And the initial study may say that, no, there's no impact, so you could either have an exemption or something. But if there is impact, then you look and say, well, can it be mitigated? And then you're in the realm of a mitigated negative declaration. And then if it's so significant that cannot be mitigated, then you're in the realm of an environmental impact report. But all of this leads up to that, and that's the context of why we update the guidelines and why it's important to localize it to the city. And I really applaud this effort. It helps a lot. It helps, first off, the applicant understand what the rules are. How do you play this game? But it also, I think, is a big assist to staff, so they can look at it and say, all right, I have a project, and I go through this checklist, and I check blocks that say there may be an impact, there may not be an impact, maybe it's significant, whatever. And then there's an evaluation that's done that says this is a negative declaration, it's a mitigated negative declaration, or it's an EIR. And that's what often gets challenged in court is that analysis. And then when you get to an EIR, the analysis is, well, did you look at something hard enough, long enough, whatever? But the important thing is that we now have these thresholds of significance, and that, I think, is an outstanding effort. And there's a lot of work involved with that. The clarifications to the guidelines, I think, are excellent because it does localize it to us, of either combining some sections or moving some things around and looking at it in a different way. We get a chance to look at it as we, citizens of Camarillo, look at it, and professional staff of the city of Camarillo. And I think that's good. There's still a huge question on this transportation issue about vehicle miles traveled versus level of service. The old CEQA guidelines and the old CEQA said, no, you've got to talk about levels of service, of whether an intersection is A, B, C, D, E, F, where A is free-flowing, everything's great, to F, where you've got absolute gridlock, dead. Vehicle miles traveled doesn't do that. But that doesn't mean that an environmental document or an analysis of a particular project cannot include that, because what the city can do is go back and look at the general plan. And in the general plan, there are certain pieces of criteria that can establish what a and I'll call it level of service, but what that would be for a particular road, an intersection, or something like that. Is this particular project going to contribute significantly to the traffic as a result of its being built? And while vehicle miles traveled are trying to get the big picture for, it really goes back to the greenhouse gas question, but I'm not going to go there. Anyway, there's lots of examples where vehicle miles traveled don't really address the particular issue, and where we can tie this back into the general plan of what are the goals and guidelines of the general plan, then we have, again, substantial weight to go behind and say whether there are impacts or not, and it is defensible. So I just wanted to make those kind of general comments as I think what I'm saying is I'm blowing the horn of staff on a great job done on a very necessary thing, but feel really good how they've localized it to our conditions, and I really applaud the effort. So thank you very much for my little dissertation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Talmadge. I'm going to take that as a running start, by the way, on your final comments and recommendations on this matter. If I may.
It is.
I believe that we have heard from the public. We mentioned all the different agencies, and their input has been incorporated into this document. So without further public comment or seeing anyone else from the public trying to get in, I'm going to close the public testimony portion of this, and now we will get into commissioner comments and recommendations on this. Gene, do you have anything further to add to what you just said?
No, I think I've spent my nickel, so I'm very much in support of this effort and this work. So I strongly support approval of a resolution and a recommendation to the City Council that it be approved.
All right, thank you. Ms. Vandermeulen, I'm sorry. It's getting late.
And thank you, Gene, for that, all the further explanation on the traffic, because I think traffic increase is near and dear to all of us. So we do want to have a way to really measure that when we can. I don't have any further comments on this. Like I say, I read through it. It was systematic. I understood where I was going. So I like the way that it does flow from one to another. It's easy to follow. I appreciate all the work that went into this. So I'm good with it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Edsel?
Yeah, I concur with the comments, and I'd say we should vote on it.
Mr. Espinosa?
Yeah, I appreciate the work that went into this. I know there was a lot of years in between updates, so I know there's a lot that had to be done. So thanks, staff, for the work they put into it. One procedural thing I had was, thought I had was the 11th hour letters we got today. I think, you know, normally when we get public comments, we would normally, you know, whether somebody, I like the idea, I don't like the idea, we're okay addressing those at the time. But if there's something that has like a legal subject matter, I think to me, it seems like it might be appropriate to just address that up front when the agenda item comes up, to just focus on that to begin with, to say we've addressed that, we looked at that, this is how it went. You know, in case it's something we were considering pulling because of the nature of the letter or so forth, or the kinds of things. So that was my only comment on that, whether that's something that we might consider.
I would share with you that I appreciate where you're coming from with that, and it's a challenge for us. It's always a challenge when we get late-breaking comment letters, and we do our best, of course, to analyze the letter to ensure that what we've done is consistent with the law. and is legal, of course. And so if we had a late-breaking letter that gave us pause or concern to a level of significance where we couldn't analyze it adequately, and we felt like we needed to pull the item, we would definitely do that. And we would share with the Planning Commission that we received some additional comments from the public and whatever agency they're affiliated with, but that we needed additional time to adequately research the comments raised, and so we would have to table the agenda item. So while we do our best to scramble and be as responsive as we can be, we had several people in the actual council chambers today to practice social distancing and meet on some of the comment letters we received today as late as 3:30. And so fortunately, we got the work done today, but there may be an instance in the future where we don't, and we would definitely table the matter if that was the case.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that input, Joe. Yeah, I like that big efforts have been put into tailoring this document to our city. I think that's really important. I also like the streamlining that is involved. I don't know how many times I've read through an EIR and read through one section and then looking at the next section and feeling like I just read this and trying to figure out, the difference is between the two sections or previous sections. So I appreciate the streamlining efforts as well. I agree with all the comments of commissioners, and I can certainly support recommending this to the council for approval. So, without any further comments, may we have a call for a resolution, please?
Thank you, Chair Murphy. Resolution number PC 2020-11. A resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Camarillo recommending approval to the City Council of the update to the city's CEQA environmental guidelines.
I'll make a motion to wait for the reading and vote for adoption.
I'll second that.
Okay, moved by Mr. Edsel, seconded by Ms. Vandermeulen. Let's go ahead and vote, please. Mr. Talmadge.
Yes.
Ms. Vandermeulen.
Yes.
Mr. Espinosa.
Yes.
Mr. Edsel.
Yes.
And I'm a yes, and so again, it carries 5-0. Thank you.
Great job to staff.
Agreed. All right, that brings us to our final matter to consider tonight, item 11, the 2020-2025 Capital Improvement Program General Plan Conformity and Coordination Review. May we please have a staff report on that?
Thank you, Chairman Murphy. This item is the 2020 through 2025 Capital Improvement Program General Plan Conformity and Coordination Review. This year, city staff received 6 new projects from the City of Camarillo Department of Public Works and an additional 10 projects from other agencies, either with new projects either in the city limits or adjacent to the city. City staff reviewed all 16 of the proposed projects and confirmed that they were consistent with the general plan. In addition, there were 4 projects identified by the Department of Public Works with the city that did require some coordination. And I will turn the meeting over to Ken Matsuoka with the Public Works Department to address the capital improvement projects and coordination.
Thank you. Okay, we have our annual presentation of the city's 5-year CIP tonight. The Planning Commission has seen a longer version of the presentation at City Council at the City Council joint CIP meeting on April 22nd. We have a total this year of 71 projects identified in the CIP over the next 5 years. 50 are active projects, 8 are projects being wrapped up, and 14 future projects are also contemplated. Now, the Public Works Department brings the CIP document to the Planning Commission each year for a determination of consistency with the general plan. The projects and infrastructure improvements in our CIP are based on the general plan, projected needs, and future build-out based on the general plan. We have basically 5 new projects. I guess you can call it 6 because one of them is, we'll go through the slides, but it's about actually 6 projects. The rest of the CIP documents were in last year's 5-year CIP document that was determined to be consistent with the general plan at that time. And we'll go over our new projects here. So this is actually 3 projects here. We had 1 project originally, and we've split it up into 3 projects. Phase 1 is essentially our base project, and there's 2 others that are shown there, Phase 2 of the bike path and Central bike path. So we've split the original Springville bike path project into 3 separate projects, and that was in order to take advantage of the grant funding we have available now for the Springville Phase 1 project. And we're currently in design of that one. And the 3 projects that you see here, they're basically the same project as the original. Now, we've brought this forward to you because you're going to see these 3 different names on there that are different than what was in the previous CIP. So we're just pointing out that this project was split. There's also some development work that's going on in the area. So staff is coordinating with the developer in the area to coordinate the project design. The Springville Well E project is a new well in the northwest corner of the Springville Drive and US 101 freeway interchange to replace the existing Well D, which is near the end of its useful life. The existing Well D is being rehabilitated to extend its life as best as we can until a replacement well can be drilled. However, water output is reduced and a new well will need to be drilled. And keeping the well operational is beneficial as it reduces our need to buy expensive imported water. Design is scheduled to begin in fiscal year 21-22 with construction in fiscal year 22-23. The new project for electrical upgrades for Airport Well 3. These improvements will make it compliant with OSHA regulations, as well as upgrade SCADA controls and standardize the connections for emergency generator hookup. This project is scheduled to be in construction in fiscal year 21-22. The Daily Drive 101 freeway sewer improvements. The proposed project expands the scope of the existing Daily Drive sewer project to include a new sewer pipeline under the US 101 freeway, as the existing sewer pipeline crossing the freeway is operating above its design capacity and needs to be upsized to meet proper capacity requirements. The project was scheduled to be later, but it was moved forward to reflect the higher priority of this work, and design is currently underway. The project is being coordinated with the Conference Center development so that as much as feasible is built with the construction of the Conference Center sewer pipeline, which is currently underway. And we have time for questions if there are any.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matsuoka. Do we have any questions for Mr. Matsuoka or city staff? Mr. Talmadge.
Yes, good evening. Very last project, it was the sewer extension under the freeway along Daily Drive. I don't see that listed as the 6 projects. I see 4 under transportation, 2 underwater, but I don't know what happened to sewer. I'm looking at the staff report. There's an attachment. It's page 4, and there's 4 transportation projects and 2 water projects, but I don't see the sewer project. Is it supposed to be there?
Let's see. The project is an existing project that got expanded in scope, so that a portion of it, there's a piece that's extending under the freeway. So let me see.
And my question really is, I recall from the meeting we had a couple weeks ago, I know about the project. My question really is, why doesn't it show on our summary all categories, new projects only? Because there's 4 transportation, 2 water, and no sewer.
So it's an existing project that's been modified. There's a piece that's going underneath the freeway now. So there's a change to it. That's why we've flagged it as a project that's changed. Yeah.
Okay, but there's a dollar amount associated with that change, right?
Yes, there's a dollar amount associated with the change.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a reason it's not shown here?
That one, yeah. So, yeah. So this one, I don't know why it's not in there.
I'm just wondering why it's not on there.
Yeah. I don't know why it's on there, not on there, but it's basically it's an existing project that has some changes. So, yeah. It's probably something that we should look at.
Okay.
Any further comments, Mr. Talmadge?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Edsel?
No, I don't have any.
Okay. Ms. Vandermeulen?
Along with that, looking at the chart, the 4 in transportation, I don't think he mentioned the overlay, the resurfacing and such, and I don't know if it's just because it's so far out in the future.
Oh no, those are basically rolling projects that are. We have new overlay and slurry projects each year. So they're not because it's just in the future. So is that another one that we need to look at? Overlay.
Are we going to be?
So that's a like I said, it's a rolling project that reoccurs every year. There's an overlay and there's a slurry project each year.
Okay, it's just looking at it, there's no cost till year 5, so I just didn't know where a cost was listed for this year, if it is.
What we have is, I think it's 4 million that we have each year? So we have 4 million each year for the overlay and the slurry combined.
Thank you.
Mr. Espinosa?
Yeah, no, I think that we covered this pretty well in our joint study session, and I understand the challenges that lie ahead with the impacts of this COVID-19, stay at home, and revenue sources and such. So I'm comfortable with the work that's gone into this and ready to move ahead.
Okay. Comment that I have is my understanding, and I've communicated with city staff on this, is that the comments that were raised by City Council a couple weeks ago in the special joint meeting are still being incorporated into this document. Is that true?
That is correct. For the most of those are for, or all of them are for existing projects that were previously looked at by the Planning Commission a number of years ago. So those projects that are being changed are from the past, and they're not to these new projects.
Okay. Do we have any other, thank you. Do we have any other questions, comments from the commissioners? Mr. Matsuoka or the city staff? No? And I understand that there are no public comments on this as well, so I'll close public testimony on this, and we can go ahead and get into commissioner comments, recommendations for this matter. Do we have any further comments? Go ahead, Mr. Etzel.
I was just going to say, I think our role tonight is to just confirm that these projects are consistent with the general plan, and whereas at the joint session with the city, there's a little detail that they're getting into the timing and all that. I think our only role tonight is to agree that they're consistent, and so I think that's the case, so we should proceed and vote on that.
Okay, appreciate that. Anyone else? Mr. Talmadge.
I'll be honest. I just don't have a level of comfort in looking at approving and conformance with the general plan if I don't know if this is the whole picture. It's just difficult in my mind. In general, what I see is okay, but it's that lingering thought of what else is out there that I haven't heard about or don't see or something like that. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's see. Have we heard from Mr. Espinosa on this?
You have. I'm prepared to move forward.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. Ms. Vandermeulen.
I don't think I have. I'm a little confused in trying to match what I'm reading with it, where it talks about 6 new projects for the city of Camarillo, 9 projects in the county, and 1 for the water. Trying to identify them as I read here, and I couldn't quite work it out from everything I was reading. So I was just really confused on where they're located and what they are.
Is that it?
Yep, that's it.
All right, thank you. So we have comments from Mr. Talmadge and Ms. Vandermeulen asking for clarifications on this, and I'm inclined to allow this to move forward to City Council but with the stipulation that clarifications are made to address comments made by Mr. Talmadge and Ms. Vandermeulen today, if I can make that suggestion, and of course, obviously, to finish up the report so that all the city council members' comments are addressed from the joint session of a couple weeks ago. That's my input on that. Without any further comments, this is a minute. Oh, Mr. Trian, do you have a comment?
Yes, thanks, Chair Murphy. I was just going to add on to your comment. Yeah, you're right. Today is really about making a recommendation, and you can definitely include with this recommendation that staff addressed the concerns by Commissioner Talmadge and Commissioner Vandermeulen, and make sure that those items are addressed as part of that recommendation. So perfectly fine with that. And it is a minute action vote, so you could go ahead and just make a motion and do a voice vote if you want, or you could roll call, up to you.
Excellent. Does someone want to throw this out there for a minute vote? If not, I can probably put something together here. But, we recommend to City Council we find the proposed public improvements of fiscal year 2020-2025. City of Camarillo Department of Public Works 5-year capital improvement program, including Ventura County Executive Office and Crestview Mutual Water District CIPs are in conformance with the City General Plan, with the making clarifications on the items that were raised by Mr. Talmadge and Ms. Vandermeulen today, and with our understanding that the City Council comments from the joint session will be addressed prior to their final review of this document.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we just go ahead and vote on down the line. Mr. Talmadge?
Yes.
Ms. Vandermeulen? Did you vote, Ms. Vandermeulen?
I did.
Okay. It's kind of coming in and out. Was that it? What was your vote?
My vote is yes.
Yay. Okay. Mr. Etzel?
Yes.
And Mr. Espinosa?
Yes.
All right, I'm a yes too. So wow, that carries 5-0. Which I think that's all the items for us to consider tonight, and that moves us to the director's report for this evening.
Thank you. I only have about 45 minutes worth of material to provide, but I'm going to cut that short based on the hour of the late hour of the meeting at this time. So I will let you know that we don't anticipate having a planning commission meeting on May 19th, so you can clear your calendar that evening. But we do, however, anticipate having 2 items on June 2nd. So if you could please maintain availability to attend that meeting for the Planning Commission on June 2nd. We do anticipate having a meeting. If that changes anytime soon, we'll definitely let you know. You guys did a great job tonight. I know there's always some hiccups using Zoom, but we appreciate the effort and the success. We had a successful meeting with a very heavy agenda and 5 public hearings, and you all did a great job, and I really appreciate the cooperation. And I also want to thank all of our staff, all of the community development and public works staff that participated this evening to make the meeting a success. It's definitely a team effort, and we also had significant support from our administrative services staff. So not only did everyone do a great job on putting together the agenda materials and all the background work that was presented this evening, but we appreciate everyone coming together to make the meeting happen tonight in front of everyone in their computer systems at home, and then also for our viewing public. So thank you all very much. This was a significant evening in that we had probably 18 months worth of work or more with the CEQA guidelines and the concept plans, working with David Goodale and Michael Brown, our 2 consultants this evening, and they've been a pleasure to work with, so we appreciate their diligence and dedication as well. So thank you all very much, and I appreciate your dedication once again. That concludes my presentation for the director's report.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was less than 45 minutes, so we very much appreciate that. All right. Final additional commissioner comments for this evening? Anyone? Beverly, do you have something?
Yeah, I just want to follow up with that and agree that all the support that we got through all of these packages were phenomenal. There was so much information. We know it took a long time to put it together. Most of it was very easy to read, going through it and follow it. So, you know, I, especially still being a little on the new side of some of this, really appreciate how easy it was to get through it. So, thanks to everyone who did all the work on this.
Excellent. Yeah. Mr. Edsel?
Yeah, I was just going to say thank you. These are definitely interesting times, and I thought the meeting went real well. You did a good job tonight, Tom. Definitely different, but I think it was a good meeting and effective, and it was good seeing everybody.
That's great. Mr. Espinosa?
Yeah, given the heavy agenda that it was and the circumstances we're working under and the technology we're having to deal with, I really felt like it all went well. I thank the staff for all the work they did for putting together this meeting tonight, and we know there was a lot of work that went into this. So thank you, and everybody stay healthy.
All right, thank you. Mr. Talmadge?
Yes, thank you. First off, thanks to the Planning Commission for your insightful questions. Very good. And also, tremendous applause to staff and our consultants for putting together some pretty tough material and getting it done in a manner that it was easy to understand. I also had the benefit of a meeting on the CEQA stuff, because I guess maybe someone thinks I may be a CEQA wonk, but whatever. But it was very beneficial. I was able to provide some comments and observations, but I was absolutely thrilled to see the thresholds of significance. That's remarkable. A lot of people have fought for it, and many haven't gotten it. And for the other projects that we reviewed, the two parks are, I think, a tremendous addition to the city, and I really appreciate the work of Mr. Goodell and his consultant team, and also working with staff. So I know it's been a long night, and I'm going to quit talking because I'm sure people are saying, shut up. So I will, but I really appreciate everyone's effort in this, and I also hope you all stay safe, stay well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Gene. And I just echoing what everyone else has said, we made a lot of progress tonight, and just thinking about the total number of work hours that went into city staff and council, your consultants, there was a lot that went behind all of the items that we reviewed tonight, and we certainly all appreciate all of that hard work by the city. So thanks again. It was great. It was really great to see everyone. I look forward to the day where we can see each other in live, living color. That may be a ways away, but thank you very much. And I think that will do it for this evening. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn.
Night. Thank you.